Thank you.
Okay, I will call the April 23rd, 2024 regular meeting of the Mill Creek City Council to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and as my penance for missing the next two meetings, I'll plead.
Pledge to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Shailene, roll call, please.
Mayor Holtzclaw,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Vanel,
Here.
Councilmember Cavalieri,
Here.
Councilmember Steckler,
Although I'm not there, I'm here.
Councilmember Allison,
Here.
Councilmember Duque,
Here.
and Councilmember Paddock.
Present.
Okay, it brings us to audience communication. Anyone in the audience like to address council? Ms. Heidel, name and city of residence, please, if you are so inclined.
Barb Heidel, Mill Creek, Washington. Thank you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. I know Scott's going to give you a report on Earth Day and Adopt a Street program, so I'll let him give a more detailed report than me. Saturday was part one of the city's cleanup event. A group from the 44th District LD with two council members, Councilmember Paddock and Duque, being a part of it, plus a few people who are unable to attend on Monday helped clean parts of the trail. Among the participants on Saturday were two are taking the Citizens Academy class on Monday and Wednesday, so they couldn't take it last night. Part two on Monday was going to be mentioned, I think, by Scott, were for the city employees. Part three was comprised of all those who participated from 4 to 7 p.m. One who did both Saturday and Monday evening. I'll leave Scott to talk about the big event as far as I'm concerned. I wish to give a huge thank you to Jody and Scott. They spent many hours preparing these 2 days of litter cleanup. Thank you for their hard work, getting the supplies, having the website for all to sign up, Scott taking photos, Jody staying until all the crews had finished, plus all the organization on their part. They did an awesome job. Thank you so much to both of them. Earth Day 2024 was a great success. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. Anyone else in the audience? Anyone online like to address the council? Going once, twice, three times. Okay, there'll be an opportunity at the end. Move us on to our presentations. Have a couple proclamations. The first one is in honor of Small Business Week, so I'll read the proclamation, and then if President Elwin would come forward and we'll do a photo op, present the proclamation. You weren't prepared for that, were you?
No, sir.
I didn't dress up for it either, so don't worry. Okay, a proclamation of the city of Mill Creek. Whereas the city of Mill Creek, Washington celebrates our local small businesses and the contributions they make to our local economy and community. And whereas every president since 1963 has declared National Small Business Week, which acknowledges the critical contributions of America's entrepreneurs and small business owners for their hard work, ingenuity, dedication, and contributions to the economy. And whereas almost all businesses across the U.S. are small businesses, at 99.9% of the 33.3 million businesses in America. And whereas small businesses have added over 12.9 million jobs in the last 25 years, which accounts for approximately 2/3 of all new jobs added to the economy during this period. And whereas Mill Creek, Washington supports our local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, provide convenient and quality service, and continues to preserve our communities. Now therefore, I, Brian Holtzclaw, the mayor of the city of Mill Creek, on behalf of the city council, do hereby proclaim April 28th through May 4th, 2024 as National Small Business Week. Signed, sealed, and let's deliver it. Think they wanted to vote? Come on down. I think that is. Okay, and our second proclamation, following up on Ms. Heidel's comments earlier, is in honor of National Volunteer Week. So a proclamation of the City of Mill Creek, whereas the City of Mill Creek seeks to achieve strong community spirit through active civic participations, and whereas the city has many dedicated volunteers who serve at the city to build a strong community, and whereas volunteers are motivated by the simple satisfaction of helping their fellow citizens and making their community a better place to. And whereas these individuals have become a vital and positive force in our community and have demonstrated a common conviction that the well-being of a community is largely dependent on helping others. And whereas National Volunteer Week was established in 1974 and for the last 50 years has been a time to honor and recognize the importance of volunteers. And now therefore, I, Brian Holtzclaw, the mayor of the city of Mill Creek, on behalf of the city council, do hereby proclaim April 21st through April 27th, 2024 as National Volunteer Week.
Take a picture of Barb.
I think that's appropriate to have the head of our volunteer program accept the copy of this. Okay, our next presentation, we're going to welcome Lisa Lefeber from the Port of Everett. We've talked before about the expansion of their service area, the boundaries. And she wanted an opportunity to come speak to us, to educate us on what they're proposing, and I'll let you guys pepper her with questions when she's done. So with that, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me here tonight. I'm going to stand up here a little bit farther back because I'm a little short. So if I stand down here, no one will see me. So thanks for having me. I apologize for those of you who have had to hear this before, but I do appreciate the opportunity to address mayor and council. So why am I here? What is this? Little bit of history about the Port of Everett. So ports were created in 1911 as part of the Port Districts Act. Essentially, they were created to create economic opportunities and make sure that the public still had a voice in their economic future. At the time, particularly tied to waterfronts and railways. But as the years grew, it morphed into economic opportunities that mirrored the economies in which they operated. So for the longest time, the Port of Everett was very much a reflection, and still is, of the demographic of Snohomish County, which is maritime, shipbuilding, aerospace, mills, commercial fishing, recreation, tourism, environmental stewardship, taking care of our streams, waters, and access. So why am I here? So the port was formed in 1918, and I'll talk a little bit about it. But we are less than countywide. So we are the largest container port in the state that is not countywide. Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia, Bellingham, and then a handful of others are all countywide ports. We are not. which perplexed me for the longest time because I couldn't quite figure it out. I have, and I'll explain why in a little bit. But we are governed by 3 port commissioners. They elect 1 staff member, which is me, who runs the port operations. We have 3 lines of business. We have an international seaport, so we're the only global gateway in Snohomish County. We have a very large marina facility, so we're the largest public marina on the West Coast with 2,300 slips, and we have 13 boat launch lanes, so really one of the primary saltwater access to the bay. And then we also have about 3,800 acres of property, 900 which are developable, and most of that is developed. The rest are all environmental preserves. How many of you guys have been to Jetty Island? I know the YMCA and other school programs do field trips out there every summer, but that was actually created by the port in partnership with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to maintain the river channel. And instead of just going and dumping it out in the bay, we created this beneficial reuse program where we actually hydraulically pump it out on the island, and it creates a beach access, but then also an environmental preserve that helps juvenile salmon so that they can grow stronger to help our orcas and so forth. We also are home port to Naval Station Everett, which is one of the largest employers in the county. And just recently we were designated strategic seaport. Essentially what that means, if there's a massive mobilization, our facilities can be ready to support that within 48 hours notice. So we're one of only 18 in the nation that has that designation. And because in the international community, we're known as the Port of Boeing. So we bring in all the oversized parts for the 67, 777, 777X, Air Force One, KC-46 tanker, and soon to be the 737 MAX line that's going to start up in Everett. If you guys have questions as we go, please feel free to ask, or if you want to wait till the end, I am happy to do however you guys would like. A lot of people, when they think of ports, they think of water, which is fair, but ports look very different in Washington state than across the nation. For example, Georgia, that's part of the state's system. So ports are literally cargo ports or airports. In California, they're part of their city and their county. So they are just part of the waterfront, LA, Long Beach, you think. In Washington state, we're special purpose districts. So there's actually 75 of us, and we all operate differently. So for example, in Walla Walla, they have built an entire port system around the winemaking industry and providing incubator space to support small business in that community. So that's just one example. In our area, it's very much, we're a community that makes stuff. So manufacturing, construction, transportation, recreation, tourism, environmental stewardship. So that's kind of the trying to relate port to people. Opportunity, recreation, transportation, and sustainability. So how did we get here? Finally figured this out. So in 2018, it was our centennial. We were created in 1918. We were the 7th port created under the Port District Act. The community was really determined to try to capitalize, which sounds bad, but I should say prosper from shipbuilding activities from World War I. And so they put out a county-wide vote to try to create a port so that the waterfront could create jobs and support the shipbuilding for World War I. That failed by a small margin on June 8th, 1918. And instead of trying to, educate folks and put it back out, they essentially looked at where the votes were, gerrymandered the boundaries, put it back out the very next month. It passed almost unanimously on July 13th, 1918, and they have remained unchanged today, 106 years later. So the reason they don't make any sense is because they really don't. So one side of Chenault Beach Road in Mukilteo's in the Port District, the other side's not. Half of Payne Fields in the Port District, the other side's not. not even all of city of Everett is in the Port District. So just very challenging. And especially if you're, have commissioners or what have you, sometimes they don't even know if they're in the district. It's the number one question we get when we have port commissioner elections is, hey, I want to run for port commissioner. I'm like, are you in the district? They're like, no, I live in Everett. I'm like, but are you in the district? So the reason that's important is that we are not allowed to invest outside our boundaries. So if our boundaries are the way they are, if there was a project in Mill Creek or any other city outside, and you guys came to me and said, hey, Lisa, we've got this great project that we're doing, and we'd love to have some port investment because it'll open up X, Y, and Z. We could help you. We could support you in terms of marketing and advocacy and, leverage some of our federal connections, but we could not invest. So that's a key piece. So ironically, the hurry up and much to do about nothing, as soon as the port was formed, the armistice happened, the war ended, and we had to essentially recreate what people voted for. And so the very first thing that the port did in 1920, a couple years after the port formed, was build the Mukilteo Ferry Terminal. And then you can see on, a lot of people don't realize, but the port actually built the first airport in Snohomish County, which is also known as Highway 529 between Marysville and Everett. And then as you can see, our history goes on. I'm not going to go and bore you with all of the details, but a lot of it is infrastructure investment tied to creating jobs and supporting the growth and economy in the area. As you can see, a lot of people don't know, but the port used to own all the land that Naval Station Everett was on. We actually sold that in the late 80s to the US government to be able to facilitate the creation of Naval Station Everett, which at the time was a carrier port, and now is going to be home to 12 of the newest FFGX Constellation ships, first one arriving in 2026 with 300 sailors tied to each vessel. So tools of the trade, because we were set up as special purpose districts, we don't operate like a general purpose government. We actually operate like a private business that has a public investment arm. So all of our business lines are required to be self-supporting. So our seaport, our marina, and our real estate, they all have to pay for themselves. Any kind of public investment isn't allowed to go into subsidized operations. They can only go back into capital projects, environmental stewardship, or public access. And we do that by using that public investment to leverage federal grants, state grants, support the supply chain, also private business investment, kind of the 3P partnership. And I'll talk a little bit about that. I always tell folks I've been at the port almost 20 years, actually live in Bothell, not too far from here. And I haven't seen a project within our boundaries that we haven't been able to do under our RCW. So current boundaries, this is our boundaries. You can see the red is the city limits. I mentioned a little bit about our governance structure. I'll talk about that later on if this were to pass, what that means from a governance and representative structure perspective. We do collect a small property tax. It's 18 cents a thousand. We are one of the smallest taxing districts in the county. And as I mentioned, all of it has to go back in the ground into public infrastructure. None of it pays for my salaries. None of it pays for our operations, any of my team members. So if you see this, if it were to pass, you're not going to see, a huge explosion of port staff in our different operations, right? You're going to see an investment probably in our capital teams and our planning teams and our environmental teams that are going to be putting the infrastructure back into to the ground. I should note, and I don't know, this is a little bit into the details, but this year our capital budget, because this always comes up, so I might as well just address it head on, like what does that look like realistically? So right now we get about $5 million a year in taxes. But our capital program this year is $58 million. So for every dollar of public investment, we're able to leverage 12 plus back into infrastructure through either federal, state grants, or public-private partnerships. A lot of our investment outside of the public investment actually comes from the revenue from our business lines. So here's just a map that shows some of the countywide ports. Chelan Douglas is, I call it, they're kind of like a mega port. They're two separate ports, two separate governance structures, but they have merged to basically be a stronger economic powerhouse in that area. And as a result, they represent their community well in that format. So as I mentioned, 2018, we updated our strategic plan. Commission was very specific. They said, staff, we want you to go out, find out, one, why were our boundaries created the way they were? Two, is there value in considering a boundary enlargement? And three, is there interest? Is there even, does anyone even think that this has merits? And so we did that. We've been doing a lot of outreach over the last several years, but really kind of geared it up in 2021, 2022, doing outreach with all the cities, communities, tribes, PUDs, anybody who would, chambers, anyone who wanted to understand or had a role or a touch point with the port. And then the goal is to summarize all of this information and then be able to make a recommendation to the board. After doing all of the jurisdictional and municipality interviews, along with county executive, county council, auditor, treasurer, we went out and hired Critical Data as a third-party firm to say, hey, how familiar you are with the port, and what's your interest in having port investment in your community? Understanding that. We had about 1,500 responses, 2,300 or 23 communities. This was outside our current districts. We wanted to get an understanding of what people outside the district thought. 82% were residents. Ironically, the 1,500 responses was the same vote back in 1918 that approved the port originally. So I thought that was kind of interesting tidbit. So we asked, how often do you visit the Port of Everett? Big county, 830,000 people. How often do you visit the port? About 60% either visit or interact with it daily, weekly, or at least once a month, and almost all at least once a year, either through recreation, work, you name it, they have a connection. Then we asked people to say, hey, here are some of the main focus areas for the Port of Everett right now. As I mentioned, that would change with an expanded boundary, but these are the lines of effort right now. Respondents, where do you place value? And as you can see, maintaining jobs, transportation, community programs, recreation, environment, keeping Snohomish County competitive, quality of life. Almost everybody who responded ranked that a 7 or higher in most categories. And the survey firm thought that was unusual because most of the time they're like, that's not important. I'm gonna give that a 1, or maybe I'll give that one a 2. But vast majority ranked these lines of effort higher, and creating and maintaining jobs, transportation improvements, and environmental stewardship all got over 41 to 46%, gave it a 10 in terms of their areas of interest. Recreation, transportation, waterfront redevelopment, and environmental cleanups were kind of the top areas of interest, along with community revitalization. You can see that international trade and maritime didn't get very high on the ranking here, and that's because we asked, what investments would you want in your community? Well, the seaport is primarily in Everett, and we didn't target current Port District residents. So I just give that qualification, not that it's a value proposition, it's just you can't put a seaport in Mill Creek. So mean, I guess you could probably try. Wouldn't work. Gauging interest, we said, okay, if the port could invest in your community, what level of interest would you have? Over 40% said they were either very interested or interested in having the ability for the port to invest in their community in any of those lines of effort. The other 40% were unsure. And that's a lot of the education. What is a port? What do they do? Why is it important? What's in it for me? Kind of attitude, which is completely fair. And then about 16% were not interested at all. So this is how it broke down by community. So 62% of Mill Creek residents said they were either interested, very interested, or neutral on port boundary enlargement. Let's see here. It says 9.1% were an absolute no, and 28% were unsure. So we asked each community, to write in, where were their areas of interest. Airport facilities, you can see the common themes: airport facilities, recreation, transportation, habitat. A lot of, my take on this is a lot of folks recreate in the harbor, whether it's through boating or kayaking or what have you. And so or going to the beaches. So what we determined was that there was enough interest to make the recommendation to our board to send this to a vote. As you all are, I'm sure, very well aware and have experienced, sending ballot measures to a vote is not an inexpensive proposition. And so we wanted to make sure, if we were going to do this, that it was done with at least the best set of data we could gather within the limitations we have. So on December 19th, 2023, the Port Commission unanimously approved sending Resolution 1220 to the Snohomish County Council for consideration to put it on the August primary for a vote. I should note that it is not a countywide, it's everything but for Edmonds and Edmonds city limits. We did that out of respect for the city of Edmonds. Does have a port district. It's primarily a recreational port district. And they believe as though their enabling legislation said city limits. And so just out of respect for them, carved that out. I should note that if the port were created today, given the size of our county, we wouldn't be able to be anything less than countywide. It's a requirement that we would have to. There's also a nuance to that ties to our governance structure, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So the boundaries have to be contiguous. It has to be approved by the Port Commission, which happened on December 19th. It has to be approved by the County Council. That was done on March 12th on a unanimous vote to send it to the August primary. We have to get all of the ballot materials in, I think, by May 3rd. And then in August, it has to pass by simple majority. And then if that were to occur, the follow-on would be addressing the governance structure. So if this was countywide, not including, if Edmonds was included, it was countywide, it'd automatically be required to go to a 5-member board. But because Edmonds is not included, the very next election, if this were to pass, the new Port District boundary residents would get to decide their governance structure, which would be, do you want to be three commissioners or 5? If 5, do you want 5 districts or 3 districts and 2 at large? And then depending on how that vote came down, then the elections would occur. And if it is 5, essentially it's popularity. Whoever is the most popular candidate in the vote gets the 6-year term. The ones that have the lower vote gets the 4-year term, because Port Commission elections are only done every odd year. So they have to get back in that rhythm. If this were to pass, after the governance structure was addressed and simultaneous, the port would reopen its strategic plan. come back out to the communities and neighborhoods and say, hey, here's some of the tools and resources we have. Where could be a good investment or partnership opportunity for your community, and then build out the plan with the new governance structure so that they get a chance to weigh in. So it's not Everett, Mukilteo commissioners weighing in on new area priorities. Talked about all of that fun stuff. And so, you know, the question that you get is, you know, this is, in essence, there is a tax tied to this enlargement. So what's in it for me? Like we talked about, ports create jobs. We are able to invest in recreation, tourism facilities. We do a lot with the environment. So I'll give a prime example in Mukilteo. You know, they're in the process of permitting for Japanese Gulch. The port's paying for all of that permitting through a environmental allocation that we gave them. So City of Everett's doing an open house, I think tonight or tomorrow night, on freight improvements through the area and to move people faster. The port contributed a significant amount of money to help with matching grant funds for that project. So those are just a small example of some programs we have in place and how we can help different cities' initiatives and leverage port infrastructure money. There's a lot of federal money going into ports right now, and only ports are eligible to get them. And so having a port makes more of the county eligible for those funds. Same with like EPA funding, things like that. So we talked about next steps. We've got a series of open houses coming to just talk to the residents what's going on. I mean, they won't, unfortunate for you guys, but they won't have to listen to me give this whole presentation. It'll be a more informal open house, and we'll be able to answer questions they may have specific to their areas of interest. And we'll have our team there. Closest one to you guys will probably be the Willis Tucker Activity Center. But we're happy to, you know, add locations as the time goes on if there's interest, or if your Rotary or your chamber wants a presentation, happy to give that information as well. So that is a very high level overview of what this effort is. And I'm happy to answer any questions you guys may have on this.
Thank you. Very comprehensive. Questions? Councilmember Paddock.
I just have a couple. Thank you. That was very comprehensive. The what's in it for me, or as an old boss used to say, her favorite radio station, WIIFM. What would we say to Mill Creek residents is really in it for them? So if you kind of do the math, it's going to be what, $190 a year for the average home. Are they going to get a 12x return on that? Like what's in it for the residents of Mill Creek?
So that's one of the things I've been, as part of us going out to the different communities, is understanding, you know, what is the demographic of your community? You know, where do your community members work? Where do they recreate? The communities that have that data, and I understand you guys are in the process of collecting that, that really helps us provide tangible examples. I can give you an example just from personal experience. Living in Bothell, I come to the restaurants down here quite a bit. You know, what I see coming home quite a bit is there's really one major east-west connector to connect I-5 to Highway 9, 522, US 2. Everything else is 164th, 128th. So what you have is a lot of people trying to bypass US 2 and cutting through Mill Creek on these east-west arterials. So one of the things that the port has been advocating for a while, and we will continue to do, and hopefully be able to, you know, leverage some investment to be able to push this forward, which is creating a flyover from 526 to US 2 Highway 9. creating another east-west corridor to support, the movement of people and freight. Nothing's set in stone. There's no, no project or anything, but for me, for Mill Creek, that's what I see would be a tremendous benefit. Stop the people cutting through your community and your neighborhoods. The way you do that is you provide a more reliable, easy east-west connector that makes you want to go that way as opposed to stopping at all the lights down 164th and 128th. So that's one example. I think tourism and recreation are really important in this area. So anything that we could do to support the promotion of tourism, small business. We do have a lot of connections with the development community and the brokerage community. I don't know who operates the Mill Creek Town Center, but I do see a lot of empty storefronts. So maybe being able to support that operator or that developer to be able to leverage additional businesses to fill those storefronts that are vacant right now. That's an area that we focus on pretty heavily. And there's quite a bit more, but those are just a couple examples.
Thank you.
John or Vince, did you have any questions? Anything else?
Sorry, no questions.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you for the presentation. I assume you'll leave your information, so if people do have questions, they know how to reach out to you.
Absolutely. They have my contact information. So if anybody needs anything or wants to call and say, hey, what about this? Or a resident said this, what's your answer to that? I'm always available.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on, we are welcoming our state representatives now. There they are. If there's no objection, Representative Berg has pulled rank and asked to go second rather than first. So I will welcome Representative Donaghy to the microphone. Wasn't my request.
Well, hello and thank you. I want to start off with a preemptive apology. I was in Denmark for a sustainable fuels conference and I've been back for about 25 hours. They're 9 hours ahead. I've been up since 4 a.m. and right now my body is really trying to convince me that it's only almost 4 a.m. So that's just where we are. It took a couple extra days to get back. That was unexpected. So a lot of stuff happened this legislative session. We had a few things that I wanted to kind of touch base on. A lot of people are aware that there were some issues in transportation funding because some projects ended up costing a heck of a lot more than what was expected. As things stand right now, we are working to keep projects that have already been started and funded moving. We may not be bringing in any other large projects unless there's an emergency, but for right now, things are going to keep moving. So all the projects that surround the area that impact Mill Creek, we should continue to see some motion there. Additionally, there was funding that was assigned to helping address the issue with the World Cup 2026. It's going to be here. It is going to impact Mill Creek, particularly since we have both Seattle and Vancouver are hosting games, which means there's probably going to be a lot of traffic through the area. It probably mean that there will be a lot of people trying to stay in the area, et cetera. And that's just something to kind of keep an eye out for. We are working at the legislature to make sure that there are things in place to help support the communities. But if you identify gaps that you think need to be filled, it'll be great if you let me know so that we can work on making sure those things are addressed next session. Now, ultimately, I think it'll be good for the area. We're going to see a lot of money coming in from a lot of people. It'll be great for our economic development, but there will be some hassles. So if we can kind of nip those in the bud first, that'll be awesome. Another thing I want to touch base with, especially because I think it does impact this area a little bit more. You may be aware that there was a court case that changed or will change when it goes into effect how realtors are paid. We are aware of that. We are watching and monitoring, and we're prepared to make any adjustments necessary to the state law in order to ensure that we're following the settlement but also to do what we can to make sure that our communities are getting the support that they need and that we aren't really negatively impacting the ability to buy and sell. There's also down the path, this hasn't happened yet, but there has been funding for a program that would allow for emergency management to start looking at building standards to identify what it means to be immediate occupancy building. This can be for any structure, not just buildings, highways, bridges, underpasses, all of those. So right now, we're not going to see anything change, but in the next few years, we could start seeing some changes to building standards for future buildings or even retrofitting buildings that'll allow us to ensure that there are places for people to go if we have a major earthquake. Buildings that will keep people safe, allow them to have a safe place to sleep, to feed them, for emergency responders to work out of, et cetera. So that's, again, future, but it is something that we are working towards. Now, you probably know me at this point and recognize that my preference isn't to stand here and talk at you about the stuff I think you want to know. It's more to hear what you want to know so that I can help get that information to you. So I can keep going, or I can stop and see if there's some questions y'all want answered.
Well, we have the luxury of having both of you here, and so if there are questions, maybe we could hold them for Representative Berg, so Representative Donaghy can get some sleep.
I'll stick around for the rest of the
No,
meeting since I'm here.
Any questions? Yeah.
Try me. I'm upright right now, so.
Any questions online?
You just mentioned, Representative Donaghy, that about this earthquake prevention. So in the event that we're looking at some future building in our area, will there be additional funding available for that?
Part of what we're looking at is the additional cost, like what it will actually cost to do it. We know that Oregon has kind of a program and it looks like it's only in the single digits of the increase of cost, but we're not sure exactly how far they're going with their building standards yet. So it could be a situation where it's only like 5% difference, or it could be a situation where it's 30. My goal and what we've talked about so far is the ability to create a grant program that would help bridge the gap between the cost of the building, any building that the community might plan to build anyway, and the cost to make sure that it's resilient. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Thank you. And I have some other questions, but I think I'd like to hold them until after we hear Representative Berg, and then we can have you both up there to maybe address those questions. So I don't have to repeat them.
One question on the building code, is that referring to public spaces and public buildings, not residential construction?
Initially, it'll be public, yeah.
Okay.
It's thinking about like, we use schools for shelters, we use community centers for shelters. Fire stations, it's really helpful if they're operational and, they can get the vehicles out, that kind of thing.
Okay. I think that's the questions we have for now, so take a seat, try to stay awake.
Sway. I shall not snore.
Welcome, Representative Berg.
Okay. I think Adrian's pulling up the PowerPoint slide. I like the way Lisa held it, because that's like a pro tip right there. I'll let him get up on that. Adrian's working his magic, isn't he? Oh yeah, there we go. Perfect. And then I can control it from the mouse, right? Is that how did you control it? From the arrow. Okay. I think on the keypad. Oh, thank you, Lisa. Okay, so we're gonna do a short little recap of the legislative session. This was the longest short session ever, is what I like to tell people. It was a 60-day session, but it felt like it was a lot. So in 60 days, we sent 373 bills to the governor's desk. Just so you know, for a community like Mill Creek, it's really important that over 80% of them were bipartisan and 236 of them passed unanimously. So this was not a lot of navel gazing going, oh, this is just what we want. This was a lot of collaboration and conversations around some really good bills. I won't go through all of the highlights, but I did want to make sure in your meeting minutes you have our operational budget supplemental highlights. So we did make a bigger investment in K-12 ed, public health care, early learning, climate. the opioid and substance abuse issues that we have in terms of diversion, workforce investments, long-term care, food assistance, and of course, public safety and legal. So again, in the 60-day session, it's supplemental. So our big biennial budget is in that first year. This is our second year. So this was really making adjustments in areas that needed them. So as far as capital budget in our supplemental session, we had about $1.3 billion total. And I like to tell community groups, don't get used to that. That was really abnormal. We had a lot of extra funds from a couple of different areas, but number one was our capital gains. If you haven't heard, we do have a capital gains tax in our state. There's about 98 people in the 44th legislative district that pay that. We brought in over $800 million from that tax the very first year, thinking we'd do $500 million. $500 million of that went to our K-12 education with a focus on early learning. The other $300 million went into capital expenditures, mostly in our rural schools. Let me be clear about that $800 million. 5 people paid $500 million of it. 5 people. So you hear a lot about cap gains in community, but I just want you to know, I can with a straight face say no one in this room paid that tax. And if you did, let's talk later. So it's just really important to understand our tax system, who gets taxed, why, because it's about fairness and capacity. So we did put about $79 million into school construction, into that portion of it, additional funds into our housing trust fund. That is our area where we pay for affordable housing. Behavioral health, of course, got funding, and we did have additional dollars from our Climate Commitment Act because of how robust the sales were in the sales of our basically 2 polluters. So a couple of bill highlights. So, and again, I won't go through all of them, but we did do some important things for cities across our state. So we did create a grant to assist cities in responding to community needs during periods of extreme weather and air quality. So think about the index fire that we had a couple of years ago and things like that. We heard you, so we created this grant program. We did expand state benefits to over an additional 35,000 veterans. We did expand preventative services that are covered, that were not previously covered by insurers with a simple copay for a lot of things that you hear in the news that are becoming more common in folks of all ages. We, of course, promises made, promises kept in terms of our pension and COLA commitments. We did also have a infrastructure assistant grant program. And then we did expand our paid leave, our paid sick care leave that someone gets when they're providing care for a loved one or sick family member. These are some other bills that were amazing. And I just, we pulled out my assistant, Catherine, who's amazing. She pulled out a lot of bills and there was like 4 pages of great bills. So we narrowed it down to 2. I'll leave these here. But I will say there's some things like the cost of inhalers going to $35 for a 30-day supply. It's little things like that that feel so little, but it makes such a big deal in our community's pocketbooks. So I do want to talk about kind of the, I don't know, called the elephant in the room. Whenever I go out and talk to folks, we did have some ballot measure initiatives that 3 you're going to see on the ballot in November, and 3 we did pass as a legislature. So the 3 we passed as a legislature, we did pass the one that outlined the rights of parents and guardians for kiddos under 18 in our public school system. We did codify that no one in the state, either a city, a county, or the state itself, could impose an income tax. And we did grant local communities the autonomy to adopt police pursuit policies that suit their specific needs while maintaining crucial safety guardrails. So those were the 3 things that are passed. These are now in law. Weirdly enough, with these ballot measures, they did not have to get signed by the governor. The House passed them, the Senate passed them, and that was that. They're now law. So the 3 that are going to go in the ballot measure, you'll be seeing more information about that. My office is happy to get you information about what those current things do, the Climate Commitment Act, as well as the capital gains, as well as the, what is the 3rd one? What am I missing? I know somebody knows that. Anyway, there's a 3rd one that's coming as well. And those are 3 that, the Long-Term Care Act. So we do have those as state law right now, and our office can get you information about what those are doing in community as they stand. What we won't do is tell you how to vote on the ballot measure, but we will tell you what those things are doing right now in community. So a couple of things as finance chair, I love coming back to you as a fiscal chair in Snohomish County. We have an embarrassment of riches. We have myself as finance chair. We have Senator Leas as chair of Senate Transportation, and of course, Senator Robinson as chair of Ways and Means in the Senate. So lots of fiscal things happening in Snohomish County. We did modify and expand a little bit the working family tax credit. We expanded a property tax exemption for nonprofits providing rental housing. That was a really big deal to some of the folks up in Whatcom County. We did remove the financial barriers when buying forest land. So there were some little things that we had to tweak in our tax code to make that easier. We did expand the home ownership development property tax exemption to include self-help housing programs. Those are those programs where you're going to use sweat equity to help purchase your home. And for whatever reason, those were not tax exempt. So now they are. And then we did expand county hospital funding. So I say that with the big asterisk, that's Harborview, the Harborview that we all know and love as a region that we all use, and none of our taxpayer dollars in this county, in this city, go to support it. So now we're giving King County, that does support it, a few additional ways to make themselves whole for a hospital that we all need and love to use when, unfortunately, we have big bad things happen. A couple of finance committee priorities, and I just want to show this. This was some research that we did. There was a really big bill that did not get across the finish line. That was our Affordable Homes Act. This was one where we were trying to provide a tax break for 98% of the homeowners in our state. It did not get across the finish line, but this data does show you how it looks polling wise. It also shows you how it would affect folks in every county. So in most of our counties, 99% or more of the homeowners would actually see a tax decrease. It's something that we're going to come back and try and do next year. The other thing we're going to try for next year is property tax relief. I come here every time and talk about our homestead exemption. That's where you would not pay taxes on your first $250,000 of assessed value across the board, not means tested. Everyone gets a break. We tried that this year along with the renter's credit. Myself and Senator Robinson had a suite of bills. We're going to reintroduce those next year and still try and get folks property tax relief. We are going to try and expand the working family tax credit, and that is a great program for our working families that do qualify. But currently, if you're between the ages of 18 and 24, or if you're over 65 and you don't have a dependent, you're not eligible. So we're trying to expand it to more households that are truly, truly impoverished, if you will, that need this type of tax break. We are looking at doing more for our seniors and disabled veterans in terms of their tax exemption. Currently, it's about $500 a month, and I'd like to see that expanded. And then the other piece of it is creating a tax preference for childcare that's provided by businesses. So we've had some good ideas. We're trying to get that one right so that businesses can provide more childcare and have a tax preference when doing it. So for next session, we've got some things that did not make it across the finish line holistically, not just in finance, rent stabilization, eliminating the harmful practice of isolation in elementary school, expanding free meals for all kiddos. We're doing better. We added about 90,000 kiddos to the rules that are now receiving free meals because we no longer have reduced in our state because I passed that bill a couple of years ago. So it's either free meals or full price. We're trying to get every kiddo a free meal, and we're getting closer. If you want to know the number, I need about $90 million to get that done. And I really think that it's an important value that we have to see. So the other big piece that you'll hear about is modifying our bond requirement, passage requirement. Right now, it's a super majority. A lot of our districts, including the one that we're standing in, the Everett School District, is really suffering under that requirement. It means that your no vote is more powerful than your yes vote. So we're trying to change that. We're trying to require insurance for fertility treatments, and then also allow parent caregivers for kids with developmental disabilities to receive payment through Medicaid. And then the last little one down there is ranked choice voting. That's something that you've seen a lot in the news, and we're looking at doing pilot programs, hopefully, for some of those. So one of the things I want to leave you with is Berg Bill Basics. There will be some new bookmarks coming to you soon. It is a YouTube channel. There are 7 episodes. I go out to so many groups to talk about how a bill becomes a law. We did make it into literally a TV show. Great graphics from our House communication team. That's the QR code. And there will be a lot of bookmarks floating around that get people there. Our AP government classes, our classes. Gosh, I was just at a middle school the other day. Everybody wants to know how to do it in our state. So this is a great way to learn. And then lastly, as most of you know, I am co-located with our Chamber of Commerce in City Hall North. I'm always open for visitors. It's a great location. I love being up there. The other thing I wanted to let you know about is we do have a coffee chat, and that'll be myself, Rep. Donaghy, and Senator Lovett coming up on Saturday at 10 a.m. at Woodside Elementary, which is right down the street here. So with that, and I'm not sure if, yep, I think that's the last one. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions, and I know my seatmate, Rep. Donaghy, is still here to take questions as well.
And on the 61st day, you rested.
Right? I wish that were the case.
Questions? Oh, come on.
All right, you guys are easy.
Go ahead.
Well, first, thank you for coming in tonight, and thank you for all you do for the city and being willing to come listen to us and discuss things that we are needing and changes we need. But you mentioned a few things that I actually have questions about that I didn't know about. So my first question is about I think, did you say $30 cap for the epinephrine?
Yes, epinephrine and yeah, $35.
When does that go into effect?
So it was signed this year, so it'll be July. So they all go into, unless there's an emergency clause. So that's my understanding. So I will get more information. I know a lot of our parents of school-age kiddos who have to resupply every year with those EpiPens, and they are very, very expensive. So this will make it a little bit less expensive. We'll get some information out so that you'll know exactly what to tell your insurance companies to get that $35 copay.
Perfect. That is awesome. Because for people who don't know, it's like $500
Yeah.
for a set of EpiPens. And when you have a kid that's in school, you need 2 sets
Yep.
of EpiPens so that you have one and the school has one. And often I go through it, I'm like, it's hard enough for us to pay for this. I can't imagine people that don't have money, or if I had a peanut allergy and had my mom growing up, I don't think she would have been able to afford to get me an EpiPen in case I had an allergic reaction. So that's always on my mind. So I think that's, when I heard you say that, that's really important. Also, you mentioned that you are working for getting the percentage for the school levies reduced down to 55%. And I know.
Not 55,
I mean,
50 plus
55.
one, yeah.
Okay.
Lisa math.
I thought you said-
You put that
And,
under-
I know that was a really important, that was something that
Mhm.
the PTSA was putting on their priorities. And that's really, it's really important that we're funding our schools. And I think as we are having more and more discussions on growth in the area, we really need to be figuring out how we're going to be able to fund schools and even getting help from the legislature to somehow offset funding schools maybe in the future too. So that is an important discussion for us to have, I think. And okay, I think that's it. I thought I wrote down 3 things, but thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cavalieri.
Hey, Vince.
Thanks, Mayor. How you doing, April?
Good.
Sorry I can't be there tonight, but it's probably better I don't. I saw that ranked choice voting was at the bottom of all of your bullets there, and I'm curious as to how far down the line we are with this, because a lot of us see ranked choice voting as really kind of I don't want to say scheme, but the potential to have marginal candidates win elections, or bypass even the instant runoff processes in some states.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked that question. I put it on there because it's kind of a hot, cold issue, right? People either love it or hate it. So what we're trying to do with the legislature, and I don't know that we're going to have the votes even next session, we're trying to get to a point where we can actually just have communities pilot it if they want to. So not saying at the state level you will do it, not bringing our state to ranked choice voting, but saying for communities, I mean, there's a lot in our state that would like that option. And I think we did see it for like a hot second in Pierce County before my time. They had a few issues with it. So again, allowing communities to make that choice locally. But you know, the flip side, some folks say that you'll get more participation, you'll get more people outside of the 2-party system. So there's definitely pros and cons, but we'd like communities to make that decision for themselves. But I don't know that we're gonna have the votes next session. It's come up this is my 4th session. Each session I've been in, it's come up.
I hope not. I'd like to be heard on it further, because I think it really serves to potentially disenfranchise voters by confusing them. So anyway, pros and cons on both sides, but thanks for the presentation. And
Yeah, no,
I
thank
hope
you.
ranked choice voting is just something that somebody said.
I
and
hear
it
you
goes
loud
away.
and clear.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Vince.
Councilmember Paddock and then Councilmember Steckler.
I think Steckler should go first. He has a hand up.
No, that's okay. Good. You go ahead.
First of all, thank you very much for the work that you've already done. And like you said, I think the city punches above its weight because of the representation we have. So thank you. And the 50, or excuse me, going from 60 to 50, again, thank you so much from a husband of an educator. On the state funding of basic education, is there any path towards getting to a realistic level of funding for basic education? I mean, it's one thing to allow levies in cities and districts that are more well off, if you will, to be able to do that, but across the state.
That's a great question. So the majority of our funds right now, our revenue goes towards basic ed. 52% of our general funds go to basic education. We fund what's called a prototypical school funding model. So it's a model that says every student in the entire state is exactly the same. They're all cookie cutters, and every school is exactly the same. Every teacher is exactly the same. Every parent's exactly the same. We know that's not true. That's why we have a deficit, but we also have a model that will never be fully funded. We have 295 school districts, and to give you an idea, we have 39 counties. That's absolutely absurd number to have, and it is simply never going to be fully funded for every kiddo in our state. We fund a model, but we don't fund a student. So one of the things that I've been talking with like-minded colleagues and advocates and organizations about this last year specifically is around what do we do to actually create a system where every kiddo is funded the way they need to be. Think of your special ed child. So right now we say there's about, as a state, our model until I think we're gonna go up to 15%, but right now it's 13.1%. It says in every district, 13.1% of the students will be special ed. Now we know that's not true. Some districts have 20%, some have 5%, some have 30%. If the funding followed the student, then that student would get what they needed no matter what district they were in. It's very simplistic the way I'm explaining it, but it's a very thoughtful conversation that we're starting to have. My committee had a 2-hour work session that's actually on TVW, and I'll have Catherine send out the links to it, where we talked with Dr. David Knight from the University of Washington, who's done amazing studies on this. We've talked with our nonpartisan staff to look at where we are and how we got here. And then of course, our advocacy partners and our school board directors and our teachers. So we are going to be convening some off-campus work groups to talk through what does it look like post McCleary. If you remember, McCleary is where we said we're going to fully fund basic education for every student. Well, now we're funding a model that'll never be sustainable. So that conversation is going to happen this summer and ongoing, and hopefully you'll see some bills in 2025 that are the fruit of those conversations. But I really believe that the fiscal policy of basic education in the state needs to be addressed because we don't have enough money to continue what we're doing. So probably not the most like unicorns and rainbows answer, but it's just factually where we are as a state.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. And a second question, and I think this may be for Representative Donaghy. Any comments or anything you can talk about speed cameras? Yes, and how we get some.
You mean like specifically who you need to call to get them, or?
Well, it sounds like there'll be a new process. There'll be new opportunities to protect our citizens here in Mill
Yeah,
Creek.
so essentially the speed camera bill allows for jurisdictions to have speed cameras in certain areas that they can use to try to deter speeders, because we know that when there are cameras, people slow down, especially when there are cameras with signs, and all the cameras will be required to have signs. So every zone will have to have signage. There are limited numbers of types of zones that you can have speed cameras in, but the bill really allows cities to pursue speed cameras if they want to. It doesn't require you to. And when you decide to do so, you know, the responsibility of identifying who you want to get them from, the setup and everything is on you. We've identified a cap price, like the top amount for tickets. And that's, I want to say $145. It can be doubled in certain situations. And we've also established an adjustment for those who are receiving things like food stamps to ensure that by getting a speed camera ticket, especially if they only ever get one, it doesn't put them into a spiral that has them having to decide whether or not the kids go to sleep with a full belly or they pay their ticket. But what specifically are you thinking about? Is there anything?
Yeah, it seemed like the current, at least our current understanding was it was primarily limited to school zones and park zones. And then there would be one per city that was allowable if all of the remediations had been taken. And it sounds like the
So-
bill that you worked on expanded those opportunities.
Yeah, you can do school zones, park zones, hospital zones, work zones when workers are present, school walk zones. There's opportunities for red light cameras as well. It's still somewhat limited on the spaces that you can go because we want to make sure these are not being used as a revenue generator, and instead they're actually used to advance traffic safety. So one of the other things to think about is that if you do have speed cameras, the revenue that comes in does need to be used for traffic safety purposes. And if there are communities that are overburdened, it needs to be used in a way that is proportional to those communities to ensure that not just one side of the city always gets all the upgrades and the other one doesn't. It also requires an equity analysis before the cameras are placed to ensure that it's being done so in a way that is not targeting specific communities. So you need to be able to identify areas where there's actually an issue.
Yeah, sounds like a really well-balanced expansion.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
the one final piece, just so you're aware, is it's set so that if you have a speed camera in one place for 4 years and you do not move it, after that 4 years, a portion of the revenue goes to the state, to Cooper Jones. If you move the camera, it starts over.
How far do you have to move it?
So we actually did have this conversation. Can you just move it to the light on the other side of the road? Preferably to a different zone.
Councilmember Steckler.
Okay, I have a question for either one of you, and I hope I'm not showing my ignorance here, and I may be off base, but let me preface it with a little background. Recently, the city council had a chance to go visit some other cities. We did a tour of them, look at their residential development, economic development, and most are looking at some multifamily situations, some 4-in-1 type high-rise places. And one of the questions that came up for both, and we asked of the cities too, was condominiums. Rather than just doing apartments, in our particular need, we would love to do some condominiums. But there are some new state laws that, at least that I was expressed when asked some of these other cities, if you thought about doing condos, oh, we can't. You have to talk to state legislators about that. And so there's some state laws or controls on that. And I was just wondering, are you familiar with those? And if so, can you address them? Or are you even aware of these restrictions? Either one of you. And thank you both. I didn't say this already. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your service. That goes without saying. I should lead with that. And Representative Donaghy, I jumped a question on you without even thanking you. So apologize for that. But thank you both. Great public servants. Can you get us condos?
Yeah, sure. No, so I do. So John, thank you for the question. And it's so I have heard anecdotally from builders that condos don't pencil out as well as single family homes or as well as multifamily apartment complexes. It has to do, my understanding, talking with some of the folks, it has to do with the insurance requirements. And so that's just Mayor Holtzclaw might know better than me being with your other hat, but something about the insurance requirements in the state is a little bit persnickety, if you will, in terms of some of those requirements, and the builders feel like it doesn't pencil out. It's a further conversation because this is not the first community that we've been asked that question, because I know a lot of folks value home ownership, right? So be it a condo, be it a townhouse, be it a single family residence, it's that pride in ownership, and condos will potentially allow you for more of that. At least that's the way we think. So I think just to say it, I think we just have to ask some more questions. I don't know if that's really the case. I don't know if it's because of something that's happened previously, but I do know there is a shared expense and there's a shared burden when you're sharing a wall. And so even some of the places that we have in Everett that have been built more like townhomes instead of condos, they don't physically touch, but they're so close together, they're considered a townhouse, even though to the naked eye, you would think this is a single family residence. This has 2-car garage, nobody shares a wall, but because it's so close together, those are considered townhomes, and to a certain extent, a community of interest. Let's just put it that way, community of interest or HOA. So we can keep asking questions. That would be a great one to look at for a city like Mill Creek because we are a planned city, because we have such a strong HOA presence. So I would love to keep talking about it, but I do think it has to do with insurance, is what I've been told.
Well, it has to do with the liability. The condo laws haven't fully dealt with the liability that builders are exposed to, which hence increases the cost of
Yeah.
insurance, which hence makes the projects not pencil. I think this should be low hanging fruit. I had coffee this morning with Representative Gaynor, and I think this is an issue where we'll get support on both sides of the aisles. I think this is one where the building community can work with AWC. Because I hear this from the other mayors too, is we want more home ownership opportunities. That's something everyone wants.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Mayor. And I think, I'm glad that you're talking with Rep. Gaynor, first off, because he now represents part of Snohomish County, which I continually tell him as we're on local government together. So he's a representative from the 12th. He has Wenatchee and Leavenworth and now parts of Monroe. So that brings him literally across the mountains to do his district work. And I think you're right. I mean, both myself and Rep. Gaynor, he's ranking on local government. Having that conversation, I don't see, I mean, just by the naked eye, I don't see a problem with trying to, right size that particular requirement for liability. But at the same time, I know that there were certain reasons why they did it to begin with, so I'd love to keep talking about it.
Yeah, it pits everyone against the plaintiff's attorneys.
Yeah, well, there's that.
Yeah, there's that.
So it's really the builders then that are controlling this. It's not a state law or.
But no, it is a
No,
state
it's
law
not.
that influences the penciling out. So Mayor Holtzclaw
Okay.
is spot on. So the way the state
Okay.
laws read, it's something like, 7 years that you're responsible for all the things. And so it's hard to get insured for that. It's hard to make the insurance
Got it.
affordable enough so that you could sell it at a rate that would make it appealing to somebody buying it as a home, right? So at that point, you get into single family versus maybe an apartment with a little less liability.
So what has ended up happening over the years is even though you may not be, you have shared walls and common facilities in a condominium. So what ends up happening, is even though the homeowners haven't necessarily had an issue to deal with, you have attorneys that go around and say, hey, your statute of limitations is about up. You better file a lawsuit
Yep.
just in case to protect your rights.
Yep.
And there may not necessarily be an issue, but that's what's spawned the insurance issue because insurers don't want to insure against those liabilities. And that's what just spirals downward.
It's a little bit of ambulance chasing.
Yes,
if
it
you
is.
will. So it's, yeah. So like I said, I think we could probably get there. And again, I'm glad to know that you're talking with Rep. Gaynor because because he's a good one and he's a good ally on local government.
I mean, he comes from local government himself too.
Oh, he does. He was a county councilor.
Yep.
Yeah. So no,
So-
he's a great guy.
So our legislature can help us, can be of assistance to us in this. Is that true?
Yes, Councilman
Okay,
Steckler,
good.
just because you asked, but for no other
Me too.
reason.
I'm just going
Had
for the
you not
close
brought
here.
it
I'm
up,
going for the close,
legislature was
April.
gonna
I'm
do
going for
well.
the close. Okay.
Yeah, no. Thank you.
Councilmember Duque.
It's very, thank you very much for both being here. I really appreciate it. But I'm also just very thankful for my fellow council members because I had a list of questions as I was, reviewing and listening and what I had looked at before. And they've all, except for one, have been answered or have been brought up. So I really like that as a council where we all kind of are on the same page. So that's really nice. So mine is that really obvious one that you will remember that the legislative committee from the city of Mill Creek has talked to you about, but we would love to see supporting legislation that'll address the problem of potential misuse of current laws when it comes to public records reform. I know you've heard from us from before. And so since we're talking about priorities, I know that was one that we continue to have. So just since I have you both here, it would be very helpful for us. And we'd love to continue to have discussions with you on how to move that forward because I know it's very difficult. And I know we're not the only ones. And so just as a reminder, that's a priority for us. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know AWC is great advocates in that space. And so I look a lot to AWC, the Association of Washington Cities, when it comes to that particular piece of legislation. I think all of you as council members know why it gets blown up every year. We're under the same requirements as state legislators, as school board directors, as any other public official. I think the big question becomes just those frequent flyers, right? And like the ones who are just trying to gum up the system and how do we right size something like that? But I will say, keep working with AWC. I know we listen to them. We have our champions breakfast, every couple of weeks so that we can listen to the advocacy and the priorities. And that's always number one. So thank you for that.
Any other questions? Thank you for the time. Thank you for the collaboration and we'll look forward to working with you next session too. Thank you. Hope you get, I don't know, we can? Sure, let's do a photo.
I like photos.
Really?
I'm always like, let's do a photo.
Councilman Cavallari and myself would like to have our faces superimposed in on that photo.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Sorry. No, it's good. It's good. I just was meeting.
Okay, you go over that. Thank you.
Chaotic.
You ready? Talk to the waste management.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. We're here to talk one more time about contract for solid waste collection from Waste Management. Got some reprised slides from reports to kind of remember the path we've been on. We've been working on them. We agreed on the contract basics back in last December. They gave us some rates, really good rates for residential and commercial. A reminder on those rates, they're a little bit more than if you're in the county, but they're cheaper than a lot of other places. And we get weekly service compared to other places that are often alternating recycling and yard waste. We worked on the contract update, modernized a few things here and there to bring up to speed because our contract was 10 years old. Corrected some internal inconsistencies. And something we did just a couple of sessions ago was to revise our own code to allow a 10-year term, because the 10-year term lines up better with the way they provide services, and makes it a better prospect for both parties. Updated the recycling list. We added the contamination charge. Remember, it's after 2 warnings. This is not intended to raise money. It's intended to get people to do a little bit better job of not putting the rubber hose or the plastic bags into their trash. There's a $25 fee after 2 warnings for residential. It's $100 for commercial. We had in the contract 6 events. We've retained those. They used to be named. They're no longer named. It's up to us to figure out when those are going to be. So we'll work with Waste Management throughout. And we've added something that's called the Think Green events. It's kind of a big opportunity. Probably we'll partner with other agencies, other bodies that are doing this. For instance, the Kiwanis right now is doing the shredding events or the hazardous waste kinds of things. So we'll probably team it up with that. But this is Waste Management upping the ante a little bit and saying they will help us with those kinds of events. Customer service has been a topic. They have found that people are not really calling the Waste Management folks over the weekend and evenings. And so they have gone to live customer service during the Monday to Friday, 8 to 5 local time, and enhanced self-service tools. And really what we're going to try to push is to have people sign up for the app, because then you can find out that today they're not collecting because of snow or they're late or whatever. And so that app is going to be helpful for everybody. As much as I'm not an app guy, I've signed up for it, and it's really useful to know that this is the day that they've got an issue, but they will be picking up next week, for instance. And the other thing was big for them, and it makes a lot of sense for us. It turns out it's actually a pretty good financial deal for both parties as they switch to the CPI for water, sewer, and trash, which represents their costs more for labor, fuel, and the kinds of things they deal with as opposed to the CPIU. This was the chart. Just have it in there to remind you that we are indeed, it's an increase. So you take somebody who's got a 35-gallon cart. Well, this mouse is not gonna work, but 35-gallon cart. They're going to go from 35.67 to 40.47 per month for their 3 services, and that is more money. But times have changed. The cost of recycling has gone up in terms of the value of those commodities. But you can see the next column over there. It's a little bit higher than the county, but the county is only having every other week pickup for yard waste and for recycling, and so that's an advantage that this city is elected to have, is to have the haulers come for all 3 services every month or every week. Administrative fee, we talked about this just about a month and a half ago, and really we talked a lot about it, and I probably didn't highlight it enough. I highlighted it on the bottom there. We need to acknowledge that these heavy vehicles are beating up our roads. And so thank you for going through that. So we've changed that administrative fee to 3%, still a small amount of money. But it does help us reflect some of our operational costs for managing the contract, but really it's money that comes into the general fund, but it'll be money that will help us pay for some of our roads. 3%, it's about $100,000 at the $3 million contract level. As the contract goes up, it's just purely 3% of whatever it is. And just a reminder there that we're still half of what most cities are, half or less of what most cities are doing.
And 3% is the amount that I think we directed
Right.
to be included, correct?
Exactly, yes. Yeah, that was the March 5th action. You took that action, and so we've included that in the contract. So next steps would be to authorize the city manager to accept the agreement. There's a few little details still. Every time we look at it, there's one more typo, there's one more thing missing off the rate sheet. Waste Management is working on that. But we've got essentially everything done. There's no more substantive things to work on. It's just lots of details. So we'd like to ask you tonight to authorize the city manager to sign that once the city attorney says it's okay, which is it's your assurance that we're going to get all the details done before we actually sign the contract. They need 45 days minimum to notify people about new rates, and July 1 is when this is going to go into effect. So we were right up against the deadline. So with that, are there any questions?
Not a question, but just a note on the rates. You mentioned they're higher, but just a point of fact is midway through the last contract, they asked us to renegotiate it because their cost structure had changed. For the last half of that contract, we were actually paying less than market rate for our waste services. So in the wash, it may all even out in the wash over time. Any other questions I can't see the screen. Could we unshare before we put the proposed motion up? Vince or John, did you have any questions?
No question.
Okay.
No questions.
Councilmember Duque?
It's just a general question about this, because happy to support. Thank you for all your hard work and for the whole staff of you in getting this taken care of. But just curious for the city of Mill Creek, when it comes to apartment complexes, is there any rules about or do we have in our ordinances, I'm sorry, about how many trash cans or how many what the requirements are for any of the apartments or what they need to have?
So in the city of Mill Creek, you're required to have garbage and recycling picked up, and organics potentially, although apartments don't typically have that, but you're required to have that picked up. Depending on the configuration of whether it's townhomes, big apartments, how it's spread out, they might have one big dumpster for trash and one for recycling, or they may have those spread around their complex. Some of the bigger complexes have a compactor, and so they compact the trash just so the volume goes down. And they can choose to have it picked up every day or 5 days a week, or they can pick it up every other day. And so it's for commercial, it's priced by times per week it's picked up and by the overall volume in general. And volume kind of relates to weight. Fundamentally, if you think about it, they're doing the collection is their activity. Then they take it to the county. The county puts it on a train, ships it to a landfill in the case of garbage. What's how much weight is going to go. So that's how they develop their rate sheet.
That is very helpful for me to understand their response. But for the city ourselves, we don't have any requirements to an apartment complex about how many they should have. There's not that, you know, or that they should be collecting if they're not collecting, for example, or if we, you know, have heard of anything like that. Do we have it in I couldn't find anything. And so I wasn't sure if you may recall, since you're right in the middle of all this.
Grant's looking there. So it is down right in the middle of this. Fundamentally, you are required to take garbage service. We encourage recycling because we'd rather have people recycle than have garbage. And that's why we've got the two together. So if you get garbage service, you get recycling wrapped into it. So there's no cost benefit in not taking recycling. So we encourage everybody to do that. You will find some apartments, getting back to your question, you'll find some apartments with a great big dumpster for trash, and you'll see smaller recycling, like the condos, St. Moritz condos. I think because of the way that property was developed, they didn't have room for those. And so there's a bunch of little blue carts around for recycling, and there's a couple of big dumpsters. Where the city plays a role, when a development first comes in, we look at that development and say, how are the garbage trucks going to get there? And we encourage them to set up the facility so it works. And we do require screening of all dumpsters and in containers. So you see that through the commercial properties. Some of the older properties are struggling with that, but in general, that's a city requirement to screen those from public view.
Thank you very much.
Other questions? Grant, did you have your hand? Nope, you took your hand. Comment or question?
Just briefly, Mayor, in response to Councilmember Duquesne's question, you have a provision in the code, and it's in chapter 8.04. There's a requirement that all solid waste shall be removed at least once weekly from all occupied premises in the city's residential area. So there is a requirement that there be collection, as Director Todd was saying.
Thank you for the reminder.
Other questions? If there's no other questions, the cheat sheet is on the screen.
Heck, I'd like to propose a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with Waste Management of Washington for comprehensive garbage, recyclables, and organics collection in the city of Mill Creek.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you,
Council.
Director Todd. From surface water to stormwater, or from waste management to stormwater. No? Oh,
Hello, Mr. Mayor, council members. I want to talk about the library park renovation project. And I have a request for authorization, the county grant agreement. So first, I want to give you a little bit of background about the project, and then I want to talk about the county grant that we received. So a little background. Parks and Recreation Advisory Board requested for tot lot in the grassy area in the library park. We did a field visit back in wet season and then realized that the park is wet and swampy. And also, we did further investigation. We realized that probably the under drain system has failed and probably need repairment and replacement. Also, because of the possible wetland there, we need to comply with the wetland buffer. So wetland delineation is required as well. So we requested the grant from the Snohomish County, and they award the Snohomish County Council awarded us with a grant, $250,000. We provided the documents they needed, and the agreement is ready for sign. Thank you for the opportunity. Please let me know if you have any questions.
thank you. Any questions? Any questions from Vince or John?
No questions.
Councilmember Ellison?
So this initial grant would be used for the wetland study?
For the wetland and also for studies for the under drain storm system and possible recovery. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, thanks.
Do we have a cheat sheet?
Yes.
There we go. If there's go ahead.
I'd like to move to adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute the interlocal agreement with Snohomish County and all of the documents necessary to secure the grant funding for the library park renovation project.
Second?
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and council. I am back. I'm going to be channeling Justin Horn, who's beyond the reach of the internet, somewhere in China with his family. So the topic tonight is a fairly simple one. It looks a little bit complicated if you look at the red lines, but it's a pretty simple one, really. The building code it's in our code now is 2018. The state just adopted the 2021 version. So fundamentally, we need to update our code for 2021. You'd think that just go through and find all the 2018s and strike them out and make them 2021s, but it's always an opportunity to fix a few things. So basically the IBC, the International Building Code, is updated every 3 years. State just prepared that and replaced it on the middle of March. So right now we are in limbo. We need to get this done. So it's important to bring it tonight. We apologize we didn't get it started earlier, but we had to go through the Planning Commission and through a process with the state. There's not been a problem yet. We're anxious to get this done. The primary change, as I said, is changing every instance of 2018 to 2021, but there's some other minor changes that made sense to do. One of them was the application time limits and permit expiration. We were not aligned with the International Building Code even in 2018. We gave people 18 months for their permits and everybody else is at 180 days. Basically 180 days, if you keep working, you can keep moving forward. Our code was just simply 18 months and then a 6-month extension. So we were odd compared to other jurisdictions. So we've lined up with the IBC. Residential work that was exempt from permit. In the whole body of the permit, they had an IBC, International Building Code. They now made an IRC, International Residential Code section. So a lot of that red line you see, if you looked in your packet, is moving things and changing some exceptions that are now different in the way the structure of the code is. And the last one was a permit valuation process, clarified and expanded. There's a thing called the Building Value Index, and we should comply with that. We had some vagaries in our code and some things that could be interpreted different fashions. And so Justin did a great job of going through and clearing those up. He took that to the Planning Commission last week. Planning Commission unanimously approved that after a public hearing. So we've held the proper public hearing. Planning Commission's recommendation is to move forward. And so staff recommendation is the same, to adopt the motion to adopt an ordinance amending our code. Any questions?
I've got a really technical question that I should have forewarned you about. I don't know if this is an issue for us or not, and so it's unique. We don't provide water service. We adopt the codes, which include, one of the codes that's in this packet is the Uniform Plumbing Code. And I've become too familiar with it over the last few months for my day job. The question is why we don't adopt Appendix C to the plumbing code. And what that deals with is when you design the plumbing system for a house, the plumbing code determines the size of the supply system, but based on a number of factors, including the number of fixtures. And the plumbing code allows you to a straight fixture count. They assign values to your sinks, to your washers, to your dryers and so forth. But in Appendix C, it allows for an alternate method of counting bathroom fixtures by groups. It assumes that you're not sitting on the toilet, taking a shower and using the sink all at the same time. The reason why that's important is because it lowers the number of fixtures that goes into the chart to determine the size of the water meter, which matters based on the GFCs that then get imposed on the new construction. So in one jurisdiction, it's typically a house is served by a 3/4 inch water meter unless you have to fire sprinkler, put in sprinklers, but pushes you up to 1 inch meter. Most jurisdictions, it doesn't seem to be an issue, but in some jurisdictions that kicks you up to a higher GFC. And there's one particular jurisdiction that's adding $20,000 per house to the cost. The house isn't changing. The amount of water they're using doesn't change, but the justification they have is that, well, the state hasn't adopted Appendix C to the plumbing code, although Bellevue has, Kirkland has, Sammamish has. So I don't know if this is an issue with Alderwood and Silver Lake and what they require the builders to put in for meter size, but I should have forewarned you I was going to ask this, but the question is why we don't adopt Appendix C.
Because I don't have the answer. You
Yeah,
stumped me. You've finally been stumped.
Yeah.
No, so I understand what you're talking about. It sounds like, so the state code doesn't adopt Appendix C out of the international code.
They
So
adopt
it's
A,
state-
B, and I, and M, I think.
Yeah,
in the
but then you're
21
saying
code.
some cities have elected to go ahead and adopt that on
Yes.
their own. And the question is, why doesn't Mill Creek do that? And
Yes.
I don't know. I'll find
Okay.
out for you.
Well, and it may be something we can deal with in the next code update, because just as we're adopting this, the State Building Code Council is already working on adopting the 2024 International Building Codes, which are now out. So we'll have a chance to revisit this in a
Yeah.
year or two.
But I think reading behind the lines, what you're talking about is if we are overall trying to make housing affordable,
That's
just
right.
because somebody's got 6 toilets in their house and 6 showers and they have a house that's really suited for 5 people. that
The house size isn't changing, the amount of water they're using doesn't change, but by kicking up to a higher meter size, instead of being assumed to be 1 equivalent residential unit, you're assumed to be 2.5. So you're assumed to be 2.5 houses.
Yeah.
And you're paying the cost for it. You're not using any more water, but
That's an interesting question.
fortunately, it's only been a jurisdiction or two we've encountered it, and I just want to make sure we're not hearing this from the building community in dealing with Silver Lake Water District and Alderwood, which are the 2 purveyors serving the city.
Yeah, I think we have an opportunity. What the pluses and minuses having a contract building official is we don't have him here 100% of the time, but the
Right.
advantage is he does have exposure to other communities. So we can ask our building official
Okay.
and talk to some 2 water districts how that affects us.
Sorry to drag us down into the weeds.
That wasn't too tough.
Other questions? Hearing none, can we have our cheat sheet back up on the screen?
Thank you, Adrian.
I'm gonna do this. I'll propose a motion to adopt an ordinance amending Mill Creek Municipal Code, Chapter 15.04, updating the Mill Creek Building Code.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Director.
Thank you,
Todd.
Council.
Yeah, I've learned far more than I ever wanted to about the uniform plumbing code, I'll tell you.
All right, next item on the agenda, study session. So 1961, we have two pieces of this. The first one is, as you know, we've been in this project 1961, just going through our 20-year vision. Part of that process was a tour of 3 cities locally here, Kenmore, Woodinville, and Bothell. We had the opportunity to join staff, Rob Fenty, our consultant, council, also the Chamber of Commerce, to get an in-person view of these cities and get the city leadership from those cities. Also give us a kind of just a short recap and intro about kind of what they went through during those development years to bring their cities to a point to meet certain population requirements and economic goals. So now staff thought it'd be a good idea to have to bring this back briefly so we can just recap and kind of memorialize some of the things, your best takeaways. And since the email last week, hopefully a lot of you did your homework. I see Councilmember Steckler did provide us with a kind of a written document on kind of his takeaways. So Rob will start taking notes and kind of on kind of what you saw as your key takeaways on those tours that day. So on April 11th.
So I think to kick this off, maybe we'd start with 1 or 2 key takeaways from each council member. I actually wanted to express just public appreciation for the cities of Woodinville, Kenmore, and Bothell. They were very gracious, spent a lot of time with us. I want to also recognize our city manager. His relationships and credibility with those cities made this process seamless in terms of getting them set up, and really it showed in the way they treated us. So I wanted to recognize our city manager as well in that.
Well, I'll start. I mean, I'm glad we were able to do it because I think when we talk about this stuff, I think it's hard to understand what we're talking about on paper and what it all means. So I think it's invaluable that we were able to get out there, and you guys especially, to see these places that we've been talking about. And I would encourage you also, go by some of these places on a weekend, like Wooden Creek during the weekend, or the one we didn't tour that the city manager referenced in an email is a Totem Lake redevelopment. It's probably a little higher intensity than what I think we vision here. But I was really surprised when we went there for dinner on a Friday night a couple months ago. I never would have thought of there being a vibe in Totem Lake. But on Friday night, it was really cool. We walked away and my wife was like, "Look, I could live here," which surprised me a little bit. But so I encourage you to go to some of those places, not during midday on a weekday, but go on a weekend afternoon or a weekend evening and get a sense of the vibe that's there. It's one I had. It's open forum to share your takeaways. Councilmember Allison?
Yeah, I really appreciated the little extra bits of art that were around in Woodinville. It, you had to look to see it, but it added to the character of that neighborhood. Well, we went through 2 neighborhoods, but they both had different art features, just little things, the shapes of their garbage can covers, it's interesting.
Yeah, I think another good takeaway was in Woodinville. I really liked the way they modulated the buildings and modulated with the open space in various places. One place that I took Rob and Sean afterwards is we went the opposite direction as you, down a little alley that's right behind where we were standing in that open space on the corner. There's a neat little alley. It's just another design feature that they worked in that really breaks up and keeps it from, it doesn't have that traditional block feeling to it. It really helps give it a little personality, which I thought was really neat. So if you go back there, go half block behind where we were standing and walk north up that alley right there. Councilmember Paddock?
I think of the two biggest things, just the one, but the two biggest things I think was that message that we got from each one of the cities, whether it was direct or kind of subliminal, that transformation is really hard and it's tumultuous and it takes a lot of effort. And what I heard from one of the cities, Kenmore, was that they had turned over their entire city government. And there were a lot, and I think it was Bothell, there were a lot of 4-3 votes. And there was a lot of pushback in Woodinville about what they were trying to accomplish. And what I took away from that, and again, I'm as the rookie on the team, although the hair doesn't look like it, as the rookie on the team here, we do a lot of 7-0, 6-1 seems scary, and 5-2 almost nefarious, in that there's the fear of backlash against some things that are big. And if we want to transform and do something big, it's probably gonna take a majority, not unanimity. That's one of the things I took away.
There is a lot of backstory in Bothell that we don't need to get into tonight that explains those 4-3 decisions, but that's a
Well,
whole nother story.
Now that we hear you're moving to Totem Lake, maybe you
Yeah,
can let
that's
us
right.
know.
Moving to Kirkland. Councilmember Duque.
So my takeaways, 1, 2, 3. And I think I've actually spoken to you about these when we had lunch before. So they're kind of all over the place. But one of the takeaways I got is I really appreciated in Woodinville the pointing out of the differences in design, the requirements in design, from one which was like it hit all of the design requirements, and then the one that went above and beyond. And what's clear to me from hearing from the community in general, and of course, no one's ever happy. We get that humanity's a whole nother beast. But from the farm and language like that, I think there's an opportunity for all of us before we start, or not before, we're starting this already, but really taking a look at what are those requirements when it comes to design? What are those things that is really important for us? So we put them in place earlier on than when we have developers coming and, looking, and then there's any kind of push and pull, but really being protective of what that identity is, about what that look is, what we want from people, what we, as a council staff, just really focusing on that. So that was one. The other is more of a way of thinking, and this comes from Kenmore. When we were looking at the water feature, it was just a quick kind of flippant comment, but it really touched me in a way, because the comment was, I'm sure it's a for those who don't know, it's a water feature. It is not a splash park. But the comment was, what do you think this becomes? How do you think this is used? And we all went, oh, a splash pad, and we all laughed about it. But instead of them taking it away or building it, changing it, the answer was, we just chlorinate it more, and it would, and we just, we test it more, we chlorinate it more. And it was that kind of thinking. It's not that, and I know there's all these rules on liability, but it's not this like, well, we can't do it because it'll become this, or no, it's this clearly is what people are using it for. People are coming here as a gathering space with their kids, and they're using it for that little bit of time. We should be open and welcome to problem solving that way instead of an immediate no, but with well, how can we accommodate this? So that was my thought on way of thinking. And then the third one was more of an overall, which is, I believe, if I'm wrong, all of these places were buying the land. And that's not something we have done or we're doing in terms of the areas that we are currently talking about in terms of this tour for the sub area. So I find it seems already difficult based off of the timelines that we saw and the true visions and the changes and the turmoil, but they stuck with it and purchased land. And that has not been a discussion point that I've heard so far from council, that we would want to do that, because my takeaway from all of that kind of things is, you know, we can do all this planning that we can, and all this visioning, but really at the end of the day, we don't own it. And there can be a strip mall owner who's local who doesn't want to change it, as we saw in Kenmore. Or there might be something underneath, like a dry cleaner, you know, there's all these different reasons. And so, and I look back at what we're doing with the DRCC and how that process has been kind of going, that it's making me realize we have to do this obviously for the comprehensive plan. But in terms of this long-term visioning, I'm seeing a disconnect about how we come into play, because most, when they make the determination, have also been following through with the purchase of land. So those are my 3 takeaways.
We do own a portion of the sub area.
Of course, where we are.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. You're right. But I mean, I think that idea of not, or maybe that is where we need to be growing, is thinking through what that looks like about purchasing.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually wrote down 6 things, but I won't say all 6 things, but Councilmember Takei actually touched on a few of them. So I'll only re-highlight one that she touched base on, because for me as well, one of the things I took away from was also, I made a bunch of notes on that we need to be making sure that we have our code shored up ahead of time in order to make sure that we are getting the types of buildings, the look that we would like. And also I put now, like, for example, the space in between, you know, there was all this, Woodinville, right? Where they had all the space in between for people to gather. They had the green, the public space, kind of making sure that's within the development that's happening. And so to me, that was something that I took away as really important, is that we need to make sure we're getting those code tweaks, if you will, in place ahead of time, so that we're getting the final product that we would like to have. Other than that, that I'm looking, it's different than, my big thing that really too, as I went through here, was I kept saying, we don't have our identity. Like, everybody has their thing that they were focusing on. You know, Woodinville's got wine. Like, what is it? What do we want our thing to be that draws people here? And how do we work on creating that perception in everybody's head, the identity from everybody, and capitalize on that? Like, what's drawing you to come here, to go to shops, to go to store, like to bring in shops or stores in regards to economic development? Just to me, that was a really big thing that I kept thinking about. And also the overall takeaway, and Councilmember Paddock kind of hit on it a little bit, and also Councilmember Duque, when she discussed how they were discussing owning property, but we have to dream big about what we can be. So that's like my number one is takeaway, was that we need to start dreaming about what we can be and create that vision and go about seeing how we can make that vision become a reality. And we need to do that from a space of not just immediately being, no, that's impossible, we can't do that. No, we can't do that. No, we can't do that. It's gotta be, we need to dream about it and then go about seeing, well, what can be possible? What can we make happen? So that was my big overarching takeaway, if you will. And then I have other small things, but I guess since we're only supposed to give 3, I'll stop there.
No, I fully agree with that. That was one I had written down too, because I've written down dream big, just like DRCC. Don't let the dream stop us from thinking of what we want to do. But also the other takeaway was they did it. This is doable.
Yeah.
They found a way to make it happen. And I agree with Councilmember Steckler's 4th bullet point. A little bit contrary to Councilmember Paddock. Don't wait for full consensus. You'll never get everyone to agree. If we hadn't waited for everyone to agree, we never would have built Town Center. And I agree, we've got to get as much consensus as we can, but we can't expect unanimity on an issue like this. John, did you have anything you wanted to say about your?
Well, yeah, I've been clicking off as people mentioned, the ones I had on my list, but just to expand on one and one other one. I was really surprised at Kenmore how much I went one part about that I liked. They built a space that half was covered for inclement weather and the other half was open for when it's nice and sunny, with the pure purpose of a place for the community to come together. And we talk about an engaged community. That was a great facilitation there. They put a little coffee shop in the closed one so people could come there year round, get coffee, but they could sit in there at those tables and have a small meeting or a large meeting. You can move things around. There was a private conference room, and it's a space that's there for the community to come, and it promotes community engagement. And then the open area, as Councilmember Decay said, they built a water feature to make it look pretty, and they had stone benches and stuff. But in the summertime, it becomes a splash park, and the place is a mob scene, quote unquote. So what a great opportunity to provide a place for families to come down, for kids to play in the splash park, and for community to be engaged, to meet each other, to come together. If that's one of our strategic focuses, I thought that was an interesting, we don't have to do exactly the same, but that concept that they had was wonderful. A place for the community to go, a place that can be there in cold weather or beautiful weather. I thought that was really good. And then a couple other things.
John, didn't they call it their community living room? Isn't that what they referred to?
That's exactly right. Good point. Yeah. I just thought that was a good piece if we can make something like that happen with DRCC in our application of it, and I'm sure we can. I think there were some real positives there. And that splash park, great point. Water feature becomes a splash park. Don't stop it. It's bringing people together. It's making people engaged in the community. Let's throw chlorine on it and make it safe and keep it going. The other one is my last response, and in talking to each one of these city leadership, there is a challenge of getting public's input. You know, you do want to get their input, you do want to get their response, but something I kept hearing a lot of is, instead of asking them what do they want, show them what you proposing and get their input on that. It's like Steve Jobs always said that don't go out and get people's opinion on one of our new products. They don't know what they want until they see it. So we have to create it and show it to them. But I do think it's important that if we have some ideas like for DRCC, let's capitalize, let's
Encapsulate.
Thank you. Encapsulate them, give that some legs, and then have the public give us feedback on that. Do you like a civic center with a performance space? Do you not? Do you want, if giving them a specific thing to look at, I think we'll get much better and hopefully more comprehensive input from the community. That was my number 8, but I definitely was surprised that Kenmore won, and I agree with everything else that people have been talking about. A lot of the other ones there as well.
Councilmember Ellison?
Yeah, just a few more thoughts. So our port CEO, mentioned that we have some empty storefronts, but all 3 of those places also were struggling with empty storefronts. And at least 2 of them advised us to make sure, if we were thinking about adding more retail space, to make sure it could be used as retail or residential space, because the flexibility is important when you can attract the businesses into those spaces. So that was a good takeaway that I took from that perspective. Another sort of, how do you make this work kind of thing. All 3 of those municipalities, and maybe it was the time they were developing, but they all used a similar tactic of acquiring the land to have more control. And, we're going to have conversations about what tactics we want to employ to help steer whatever development our vision leads us to want to attract. And the other big key that I took away was know when to walk away from a developer. So that's all I have.
Councilmember Paddock?
I just had a couple of yes ands, actually. Yes and to John's comment on the communication, because that was another one around the way to get over the hurdle around consensus, or to help the hurdle around consensus, is that communication, over communication, proactive and continuous outreach. And one of the examples of that was in Kenmore, where they had multiple city conversations with multiple council members, city leadership and whatnot on a scheduled basis. One month it was on Tuesday, the first Tuesday of the month. The next month it was the first Saturday. And it was a revolving group of city leaders that would be there for that chat to be able to have that continuous conversation. And I think that played off of what Councilmember Steckler had said. And then just to jump on what Councilmember Allison mentioned, one of the folks, because I'd asked about the retail, like, who's coming in? And it's all restaurants and entertainment. And the quote that he had was, or I think he had was, retail ain't what it used to be. It's entertainment and restaurants. And maybe we're looking at the wrong things when we say, geez, we really need to ... Maybe the market is telling us they don't want to come to retail in a small shop, in a small area. They want to come and eat or put their kids in a swimming pool.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. One more thing I wanted to add was, I felt we got a lot of conversation regarding trying things out of the box to try to spur economic development. And then it's okay if it failed. Like, we need to be willing to try something and understand that if it fails, we learn something from it and that we can use into the next thing. And some of the examples were the business incubators, the small business incubators, and then the small business pop-up in Bothell. Because I thought that was really important to take into, because if you never try anything, you're never going to find anything that might take off and work. And then, so you got to be okay with failing. Doesn't John Maxwell write a book about that? And so you've got to be okay to fail and learn those lessons in order to find what will work and create some economic development by thinking out of the box. So I thought that was a very interesting takeaway.
Councilmember Steckler?
It's funny you should say that, Mayor Pro Tem. I did have one other thing I didn't have on my list, and I can't believe I forgot about it. But in the city of Kenmore, they had the small business incubator that they created to help launch small businesses. And their hope was that they would grow into bigger businesses and stay in the city of Kenmore. But the idea, two sides of that, there are more and more businesses starting out of people's homes nowadays. The technology has changed that. You don't need storefronts, but it's great for community. And that's why we've got the work loft locations that provide you some administrative support. But what they did, they provided administrative support to people who wanted to incubate their new business, but they also provided them with marketing and promotional support, online support, which I thought was brilliant. So not only helping them from an administrative standpoint, but helping them get the message out so that business could be successful. I know in talking to our chamber president who was on the tour with us, he was very, he saw that as a great positive, because from economic development, if you can get more of these home-based businesses, consulting or whatever, otherwise, off the ground, it's more revenue and more success for our residents. So a small business incubator, I think that was a very creative idea. Your goal is not to grow businesses to have them stay, but your goal is to help grow businesses, help your local community grow its home-based business, which I thought was extremely positive. Sorry, and I forgot to put that on my list.
Okay, any final comments? Maybe one of us, I'm going to be gone most of May, but maybe someone should take Councilmember Cavallari out on a Saturday or Sunday and do a field trip and have a glass of wine or two. Be good to see those places. Should we move into the next steps on the guiding priorities?
Absolutely.
Fortunately, Mayor, I've frequented some of them, or actually all of them, several times. So especially Woodinville.
So you're familiar with them?
Mm-hmm. Woodinville, Bothell especially. Yep.
Excellent. So the intent of that was obviously, while it's fresh, be able to share. I did capture notes while we were going. I'll integrate Council Member Steckler's notes and any others that you write out, and we'll make sure that we aggregate that and get it back to you. That's going to be key as we continue forward in the continuation of the visioning and the setting of strategic priorities, and as you get into conversations around the sub area. So that was the intent of that. So we'll move into the second study session, which is really around the continuation of the strategic visioning conversation. And really what we want to do tonight is start to provide that link to planning, which eventually allows staff to create a budget that aligns back to the vision and the priorities that you create. So as you know, I sat down with each of you individually in light of the strategic vision that we talked about last time to talk about what are the 3 to 5 year priorities. And so I want to play that back to you, and we'll have a study session on those tonight. So as we talk about 3 to 5 year priorities, we obviously continue to talk about the themes that we've built through this process and how they framed into the draft strategic vision that we have. This is now the working draft based on the study session that we had 2 weeks ago. And my understanding is there's going to be some socialization opportunities even starting tomorrow with the State of the City Luncheon and the ability to start sharing this with the community and getting feedback. And my understanding is that the mayor has the intent of approving this sometime in May after getting some of that feedback. So in the meantime, we'll start to use this statement to move forward into the planning process so that staff can start getting ready for clarifying a plan and eventually a budget to bring back to you. So this is the way that I would propose that we start thinking about it, that we have the 4 guiding themes at the top that come out of the strategic vision. And those should lead into a conversation around 3 to 5 year priorities. You started this work at the strategic retreat in January, so we're going to pick up on those conversations. But effectively, it's important out of that vision that you then guide staff to say, as you go off and plan and start to create a budget, here are the priorities that we have as council that we want you to plan around. So we want to make sure that there's an articulated list of those priorities that staff can start to plan around, and then they go off and do their work to start staging out what are the key deliverables for each of those priorities, how do they stage out over multiple years, what is it going to take in terms of requirements and resources, and they turn that into operational plans and timelines, which effectively is what we call a strategic plan. And that should then be the context for the budget that they bring back. My guidance to you is by the time you get to the budget, it should be a 7-0 or 6-1 vote. Now, there are times where you have some disagreements. However, if you do this properly, this is a process that will live beyond any turnover in council and any turnover in staff. So there's a repeatable way that the city goes through planning and budgeting, and it ties back to the vision. So that's what I'm proposing is we start to link that so that it goes all the way down to the budget. So as I mentioned, you started this work at the strategic retreat. This is just a capture. You have the report. This is just a pull out of the report for what was characterized as the long-term goals in that process. And the way that you talked about them was the time frame of 2025 and 2026. And the ones that ranked at the top are listed on the right-hand side. So those are fairly familiar. So as I reached out to you, we started with both the vision and these, and I simply asked each of you the question without any feeding. I basically asked you the question, what are your top 3 to 5 year priorities? So the top 3 that I'm going to show you, all 7 of you stated. So a lot of continuity in terms of what's on your minds. The number 4 priority that I'm going to show you, 6 of you brought forward, and the number 5 priority, 5 of you brought forward. So it just shows the level of consistency of what you're talking about, and a really good foundation based on the process that we've been going through and how that translates into the priorities. So this is how they characterize, and this is what I want to have a study session on tonight. These are in no order of priority. However, I will tell you that the top 3 were the ones that all 7 of you brought forward. So the first is to create a vision and implementation plan for the sub area. So Mayor Pro Tem just talked about this in terms of a really clear vision for that sub area, and that will then translate into an implementation plan so that you know exactly what has to happen and when. The second is around the multipurpose community facility that we've been calling DRCC, and effectively this is to approve, design, and develop that facility. And I'll give you examples of deliverables that came out of your conversations. The third is to develop a plan for financial viability of the city, both short-term and long-term, to answer the questions, where revenue is going to come from. Is the council confident that those revenues make the city financially viable over time? Is the sub area enough to make the city financially viable over time? And is annexation even necessary? So that plan for financial viability gives clarity so that you can have all of those conversations. Number 4 is reclarify and meet city standards for well-maintained outdoors and public spaces. And number 5 is to increase community engagement. So to provide context for the study session, out of your strategic retreat and out of the conversations, I listed on the right-hand side some examples of potential deliverables. This is actually what you would expect staff to come back with in terms of here are the deliverables and the staging of what it's going to take, but you've already talked about some of these. So it gives us some cues of what can live in each of these. So in the vision and implementation plan for the sub area, obviously part of that is finishing up the comp plan, having it approved and execution. There would likely need to be an economic impact study for the sub area to know what the projected revenues are, what that means for financial viability, a vision, and then a rezoning plan for the sub area, and then an implementation and development timeline, effectively an implementation plan.
Rob, right here, over here.
Where are you? Yes, Mayor.
One I would add to this is putting together the plan or the range of options we have, getting to the point of how do we make this happen? Because there are things that we could do or consider as a city short of acquiring property. So you heard the gentleman from Main Street talk about doing a planned action EIS. So we invest in doing the environmental review up front, which makes it more attractive to a developer to come in and buy the properties. There's things we could do with this property. There's things we could do, regional detention, investing in regional detention with the pond. A bigger one might be, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, our discussion with Representative Del Bene yesterday, but do we invest in redeveloping the boulevard ahead of development so that it's more attractive than it is today? And it's there for when the properties are, if and when they redevelop. So there is a range of options, and I think that staff needs to lay out for us that we could take or consider taking to implement it, which may not be encapsulated by the 4 bullets that are up there.
Right. So rather than going through word for word, you can see, some of the examples you talked about DRCC at the strategic retreat in terms of some of the things that would need to come out of that. The plan for financial viability, I mentioned, these are the questions that you'd like answers to in terms of where do the revenues come from? Is the sub area enough? Is annexation necessary so that there's context for setting that? And then if it is, you can talk about annexation policies and criteria. Well-maintained outdoors came up consistently as a reprioritization and an implementation of the standards around well-maintained in the city. The prioritize and implement a cleanup plan for medians and buffers was brought up multiple times. I checked with the city manager on this, and that happens to be one of the funded ARPA projects he mentioned, so that's in scope, so that you know. And then there were other things around that in terms of engaging out to the community and the HOAs to make it a collective effort, as well as potentially code enforcement. And then community engagement was one, as I mentioned, five of you brought this up, but it was really ingrained across all of them. That as you talked about clean and safe, then you talked about well-maintained outdoors. This was a common theme. This was also one that staff brought up significantly as a part of the conversation that I had with them as a priority to increase understanding of priorities over the next 3 to 5 years, engage the community in those, and make it, live up to that community engagement vision and priority that you have. So these were the 5 that came back. I'm going to stop there, and really that's the kickoff of my intent of this is that you engage these. You do not have to have these perfect, but you really want at this stage be giving guidance to staff so that they're on the right track as they go into their plan.
Questions, comments? So is the thought just to pre-flight these tonight and when the goal of the next month, finalizing them and coming up with some certainty of direction for you all? So getting a small nod of heads, everyone's getting tired.
I mean, I'm happy.
Mayor, I have a couple thoughts.
Can we unshare the screen so I can see when? Yeah, go ahead, Councilmember Steckler.
Do we want to look at adding some? We have a timeline of 2025 to 2028 up there. Do we want to put some timelines with some of those key control points, KPI, whatever you want to call them, the action steps? There's no dates on any of them except they have to be done between 2025 and 2028. Do we want to have any of those done by 2025, 26. It's got to put some priority. There's only so much time in the city's and efforts and staff. Which ones do we need to get done first, type of thing?
It's a great point, Councilman Steckler. That I would have two things to that I would guide you. When you as a council are setting these priorities, I framed it as 3 to 5 years consciously because at any given point in time, you're going to be in a different cycle around the biennium. But my guidance to you is that you're always looking out to the extent of this coming biennium and the next. And so right now, that would put us out 4 years. Next year, you may look at them as 3-year priorities because you've got, the finishing of the existing biennium plus the next. And so it may be a slightly changing timeframe over time, but you're always in that 3 to 5 year period. And then to the second point, as you guide staff to come back with their planning around this, one of the expectations is they should be staging these for you.
Yes.
Okay.
So when they come back with here are the deliverables that it takes to meet, here's the staging of what happens in year 1, year 2, year 3, and that starts to give you context of what should be showing up in the biennium budget when it shows up.
So when they come back to us with their plans, they'll put the dates on there. We'll see that then. Okay.
Councilmember Ellison?
Yeah, just, it kind of speaks to what the comments that you made too, but something that, creating tactics to encourage development, something like that as an item there somewhere. We have options and we need to think about how we're going to approach encouraging the development.
Other questions, comments? So what are we gonna sit on this and finalize in a month?
Yeah, so I guess with a lack of comments, are you feeling like these are an appropriate and good set of 5 to send staff off to start their thinking and planning?
Councilmember Duque?
Yes. Yes, I do. And I guess my button to make sure I understand is, so very happy with the 5. I think that makes sense. And something that's important for me to see is the projects that we don't know that detailed information about. I'd love to know where they fall under these. Does that make sense? Like what else do they touch upon that we may not know as much about? Things that, that are taking up a lot of staff time that they're working on. And then saying, for staff to think about it, saying, well, it falls under this, which is part of the top, what do we call it? Not strategic priorities, but our 4 guiding themes. See how they fall along all of it for some of those that we don't think about, because and I think all of us are understanding of, we put priorities for you. We know there are things that have to get done. So we can't just pile other things on top of you when there are things that have to get done. And so making sure there's a good, that you're also, that understanding with us that we know what are the things and how they fall a part of it. What are the projects, I should say?
Well, I think that's why we want to have this discussion now, so we can give staff, when they're gonna come back to us in the fall, with what it would take staffing wise to get this stuff done. The
Absolutely.
existing staff isn't gonna do it, so that's part of the discussion we're gonna need to have with the budget.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why I said, for me, it's important to know what are the other projects that as a council member, it's not, it's not a policy thing. So I'm not necessarily aware of, but I know it's gonna take a lot of time, and it does fall under this and it needs to happen. So in terms of what those key deliverables are. So it might not be something that we have prioritized, but I'd like to know what are those that you think are missing that should be involved in.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. For me, as far as the overall, what we have right here, I'm very happy with what we've come up with. I feel like we're in consensus. We have alignment. There are main priorities. I'm happy with each one. So I'm very happy with what we have put forward. And there's nothing on my mind that needs to be changed in regards to what we have right now. To me, it pretty much sums up everything that we've been discussing and has dealt with all of our priorities. So I'm happy with what we have right now.
Good for tonight?
Okay, Shaylin, can you just put up that last slide? So we'll close this just so you can have a view of how we move forward. And sorry, just go to the next slide. Thank you. To create this bridge, this was the first step. We wanted to get you all on. Very pleased with what came out of this process because, and it's no surprise because you've been talking about this and it's been building. So it's nice to see it coming together. So now we'll engage with staff. So Martin and Laurel and I will talk about effectively how to get them into this process around identifying the key deliverables. I think they're going to have insight around staging that you may not see just because of their expertise, so that they can come back with a view around the 3 years of what are the key deliverables, how do they stage out, and what are the requirements that it's going to take to get there. And then that will provide Armina a backdrop as she kicks off the budget process with the budget owners. So there will be guidance then that could go out to the budget owners in alignment with the priorities and the deliverables and the staging. And the idea is that it all ties together once you see the budget.
Councilmember Paddock.
Okay, so just a point of clarification, if we go back to that prior slide, it sounds like we've said,
Add a fifth bullet to the first one.
it sounds like we've said, okay, on the left, we're good, check that box, right? Those priorities. And so in a few weeks, when the mayor comes back from whatever he's doing, we'll get a staff kind of review, if you will, of the executions to the right.
Yeah, I think the few weeks is the operative. We're let staff come back with a timeline to have diligence around that.
Right. I'm the slow guy. I just want to make sure I understood. Okay, thanks.
You're right on.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate all your help.
Great, thank you.
Chief, flock cameras. Before you get started, so we don't have to interrupt, can we have a motion to extend the regular meeting to 9:30? I don't know that we're going to need all that time, but just so we don't have to interrupt.
Move to extend the meeting to 9:30.
So where someone seconds.
Second.
Is there any, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes 6-0. Councilmember Paddock had stepped out of the room.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Council. I'm actually very excited to be here tonight again to talk about technology. It's been a great experience working with council in regards to technology and ways we can be more efficient in our public safety mission. The approval of the USA, excuse me, the UAS programs has been very beneficial so far. And we actually have that program deployed and starting to use it, and we're going to have a report for you soon on that. So we'll bring that shortly. I'd like to thank the mayor for bringing up the flock systems in the past. We're very excited about this. I have with me Kristen McLeod from Flock. She is going to be my lifeline here tonight as we go through the process and we explain what the Flock system is about. Flock is really about real-time crime detention, or I would say deterrence and detection. It's a very interesting platform and we're anxious to bring it to you. So what is Flock? It's an automated license plate reader is basically what the camera does. What that means is that as a vehicle passes in front of the camera, it reads the license plate of the vehicle and basically takes a snapshot of it. And that's basically what it does. It then provides that information to a software database. So it gathers the objective evidence and facts about vehicles, not people. This takes a picture of a vehicle as it passes through and past the camera. It does not take a picture of the front of the vehicle. The only thing it's really capturing is the license plate. It does not have facial identification or anything of that nature. It is simply taking a picture of the license plate in the back of the vehicle. It then will alert the police of vehicles with an active law enforcement status. So in other words, vehicles that are just passing through that don't have an active law enforcement status are disregarded. It only will report on vehicles that have an active law enforcement status, meaning that it has some type of predicate for law enforcement contact. It's used to solve crimes. There have been a lot of success stories in Snohomish County that I'm going to go through later on in this slide deck, and you'll be very interested to hear some of the successes that we've had through utilizing the Flock system. And it's permissive under the state law. There are no state laws that prohibit the use of these cameras. They read license plates and provide us with information on the vehicles themselves. Images are taken by the flock system, will be owned by the city and are not shared via the department policy. The department policy will basically state that these images and this collection of data is owned by the city. We don't share that with any third-party entity. There'll be a 30-day retention on these images and the deleted unless evidentiary. So in other words, if we do have a case that is generated from a flock activation, that image of that vehicle will be downloaded into a separate evidence database where it will be stored as evidence. So if that image is not of evidentiary value, it'll be deleted within 30 days. And it won't be able, the short retention period will allow us to not have to worry about as many PRA requests. So like it says, a short retention period ensures that all data is associated with crime and is automatically deleted and unrecoverable. Once it's gone, it's gone. It takes the human bias out of crime solving by detecting objective data and events that are objectively illegal. So we're looking at stolen vehicles. We're looking at cases where there's a crime that has occurred and we're looking for evidence in those cases. So how does it prevent crime? It's real-time crime alerts. So we're actually getting information seconds after a vehicle passes a camera location. So let's say, for example, a vehicle that has a stolen stolen vehicle in our system, passes past the camera. We're getting an activation or notification to our officers within seconds that vehicle has passed this camera at this location. So it's really, really proactive. This is something that's really, the officers are really looking forward to.
So how would that work if there's an Amber Alert out? Would that cause a special alert to go off?
It does. So, and I'll get to that, but it does. So how it works is the vehicles that have this crime status, this law enforcement status, are all in a database. So they're in NCIC, National Crime Investigators Computer, right? And so they're also in the system that is utilized for Amber Alerts and also Silver Alerts. So if we have vehicles that are associated with an Amber Alert or a Silver Alert, which is usually a vulnerable adult that's gone missing, those plates are also added to the system as well. And we would get an activation on those plates as they pass the camera in the city. So as an investigative resource, they also, if we get information on a vehicle that's associated with a crime, we have a white Honda, for example, that we feel is a suspect vehicle in a crime. We can go to cameras that are located near that crime scene, do a search for white Hondas through the system, and it'll actually let us know how many white Hondas have gone through that location. And it actually gets more sophisticated, which we'll talk about in the near future here. And they serve as a deterrent. People find out that we have these cameras, and it's a deterrent. People don't want to come into the city knowing that my license plate might be captured, or I've already committed some crimes, and they're going to know if I'm coming into their city or not. So it'll deter individuals that are possibly looking to commit crimes in Mill Creek from coming into the city. This is what the camera looks like. It's a very simple device, very small. This pole here is what they call a flock pole, and it has a solar panel. The cameras are run through solar power. It's the only power supply they have. But they're very efficient. They're very effective. So this is what it talks when it comes to taking a quick snapshot of a back of a vehicle. It'll obviously take down the license plate. It runs the license plate through its system. It'll also take the color and make of the vehicle. And so they're trying to create what they call a vehicle fingerprint. So we're definitely able to associate those vehicles as this is the vehicle in the crime database based off the license plate. And then other identifying characteristics that allow the officers to identify that vehicle sooner than later. So it's 24/7 coverage. So, officers, they take breaks, they have to come back and, do paperwork and things of that nature. This system is out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it has the ability to provide updates to officers on their MDCs and their vehicles, and also via a mobile app on their phones that are issued by the city. So it's just a much more effective way of keeping track of what's going on there on the road. This is not, what they've done is they've made, when I first started with Mill Creek, I would sit on the side of the road and we would check license plates as they drove by. And, that was great then. That was the best we had. That's the best way we could do that job. And now we've made it more efficient by providing these license plate reader cameras And so I don't have to stay in that one location checking on places they drive by. I'm a lot more mobile. And I can see things that are going on. I can visit parks, I can visit housing developments, I can go through the neighborhoods, but I still have the ability to have something on 527 tracking the vehicles that are coming into the city and looking for those vehicles that have a law enforcement status. So real-time alerts, we talked about NCIC, we talked about the Amber Alert, the national, this is the national, I'm trying to remember the acronym, Center for Missing and Endangered Children, the National Center for Missing and Endangered Children. So that is the Amber Alerts, that is also going to help with the silver alerts. And then we can also customize hot lists. So those are vehicles that we might have a law enforcement status on. We might have probable cause for a vehicle that's associated with a crime. We can enter that vehicle into the system ourselves, and then we would get alert on that system as well, on that vehicle as well. So again, all data is stored securely in the cloud, and it is encrypted, and it is through Azure, and so it's government grade, CGIS quality encryption. Search reasons is required for any audit. So anytime an officer wants to look for a certain vehicle within the flock system, they have to give a reason for that search. So they're not just random searches, and it's all audited as to the reason and why they're searching for it. And again, no facial recognition software, and it's not predictive policing. So in other words, it doesn't have any analytics behind it. No personal identification information is contained within the flock system. So in other words, flock isn't getting the information that you would get on a registration. If I were to run a license plate through my mobile data terminal computer, which is criminal justice information sensitive, I get personal information on individuals that I'm running their license plate. Flock doesn't do that. It basically tells me that this vehicle with this license plate may be associated with a law enforcement status and just passed your camera. It then relies on me to do a validation of that information through my computer to make sure that I'm looking for the right vehicle. So Flock does not have any of that CGIS information. It's not used for traffic enforcement. These are not traffic safety cameras. And it's not connected to the registration or third-party database, like I was saying. They don't have access to DMV. So one of the neat features that Flock has is a transparency page. And this allows the agencies to have discussions with Flock and how many vehicles are being monitored by the Flock system, not monitored, but how many photographs we're taking, you know, how many cars are driving through the cameras. So that there's really a lot of information sharing and the stakeholders are understanding what the system is being used for. So some of the success stories in our little Snohomish County already. Arlington, assault with a deadly weapon. The Snohomish County Sheriff's Office had a shooting occur. Witnesses provided a rough description, direction, time, direction of travel and time. Using the Flock system, the officers were able to identify and provide the license plates. The suspect was located shortly after and arrested. Homicide in Arlington. Actually, it's the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office homicide. Arlington PD, which Arlington has, I believe 20, they're looking to have 26 cameras here shortly. I think that they're trying to get those installed by the end of this year. Helped identify a double homicide suspect for SCSO and Marysville via witness vehicle description. Last seen direction and approximately time using the ALPR. So the Sheriff's Office, what that is the Sheriff's Office gave the Arlington Police Department information on the direction of travel that the suspect vehicle had headed off in. A short description of what the vehicle might have been. Arlington PD went in and they looked through their Flock system and they found this vehicle. And now they were able to utilize that information to make an arrest using the automated license plate readers. A first-degree robbery, unlawful possession of a firearm. Arlington police officers responded to a report of a robbery involving a handgun at an espresso stand. Detectives quickly developed suspect information. All this information is via the witnesses that have seen these crimes in progress, been able to give a description of a suspect vehicle, and then the officers inputting this information to the Flock system and getting hits back. And so even if it's just a make and model and a color of a vehicle, we can possibly get identification of a license plate based off of the make, model, and color if the time proximity to the crime scene is close enough. So it's a great tool and very efficient. Officers received a flock alert from a local camera and located the vehicle in the car wash on State Avenue in Marysville. Officers apprehended a suspect who was identified as an armed career criminal with active felony warrants and had a handgun in his possession. So again, this is a vehicle that has law enforcement status with it. This is a person that has a warrant for their arrest, and therefore their vehicle information is in the computer. And so based on the flock camera, seeing this license plate notified the officers, they were able to locate the vehicle and contact the individual who had the warrant and were able to recover a firearm as well. Actually, in Mill Creek, there are businesses that have flock systems on their private property. Flock systems can be purchased by private entities, homeowners associations, businesses. They can place them on their property, and they can then get into partnerships with law enforcement so that we have access to their cameras. And so Lowe's is actually trying to implement this currently. And they have 2 cameras at our location in Mill Creek. And recently they had an individual who is known as a suspect in multiple thefts up and down the I-5 corridor from Mount Vernon to Vancouver. And this individual pulled into the Mill Creek Lowe's driving his registered vehicle. And the Lowe's loss prevention people were able to contact our office. Our detectives went out and contacted the individual prior to him even getting out of his car. And Lowe's asked for him to be trespassed from their property because they've had such a issue with theft. And so right there, we've possibly prevented a crime that could have occurred, possibly.
Councilor Allison, did you have a question?
Yeah, so we already have private businesses that have some of these cameras. Is there like a statute that, we have to post a sign that these are active?
No, so they're not enforcement. They don't take enforcement action. So the fact that they don't take enforcement action, there's no requirement to have a sign. They're simply taking a picture, no different than an officer would run a license plate if they're driving behind a vehicle. This camera is doing the same function, it's just more efficient.
And then the storage space.
Your mic is off.
The storage space up in a cloud someplace. Do you know if that's all in the US or is it going up into a cloud in some other country?
I would ask Kristen to answer that question.
Yeah, all of our servers are in North America.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So yeah, then we've had another incident of in Marysville of an adult female met on her online boyfriend at a local hotel. All these are pretty repetitive as to how how we're using the flock system to identify vehicles associated with law enforcement status. And then that ability really makes it a lot more effective, and the time frame, the time to occurrence is reduced dramatically. The information and the vehicle information is usually correct, and we're able to contact individuals really quickly utilizing this process. So this is actually a missing and endangered senior found in 15 minutes. This is the efficiency of the system. So in Wisconsin, silver alert is issued for an individual who's vulnerable and is left in a vehicle. So at 2:43 p.m., the vehicle is entered into the silver alert is issued. The vehicle sets off an alert at 2:43 p.m. the same time, and the senior is returned. And it's really just the officers trying to utilize the camera locations to map the location where the individual might be. And they saturate that area with patrol cars, and they found the victim really quickly. Child abduction is the same issue, right? Amber alert issued at 12:33 p.m. 1:01 p.m. the search conducted with flock safety. Suspect vehicle is located at 2:30 p.m. 5:03 felony stop, and the individual is arrested and the baby is reunited with the mother at 6. That's a great success story. This is an old slide. 36 agencies currently utilizing the flock system. I did this slide deck 2 weeks ago. To update this, this is now 59 agencies in the Washington State utilizing flock. So the next section is just really to have the discussion with council a little bit further and see if this is a program that we'd like to look at. I am happy to, the deputy director and I have already started to look at locations where we would want to implement flock cameras. They have a technical support team that is helping us. We have started talking about funding of this program and what that would look like. So really that's where we're at now. This is your first opportunity to ask me questions and get some feedback from council as to how you'd like us to proceed. And then we're hoping to come back in the very near future with some options as to what it looks like as we pencil it out.
Thank you, Chief. Questions? Can you share the screen so I can see if the council members online have questions? Councilmember Duque.
Thank you so much. I'm absolutely supportive of your next steps that you mentioned about looking into it more and doing additional research costs, all that kind of things. The only thing I found, so I have a few questions. When I saw it in the packet and was looking into just, general Google searches, the main things I kept finding were that they're not independently tested, or there's some type of evaluation that they're not auditable. They are not allowing, the company is, let me see, what is the exact language? They're not allowing independent auditing for their system. That's just something that keeps showing up for flock whenever I did any Google searches for the camera. So that's something I'm concerned about, that I would like additional information about why that is. I also found articles about other city councils looking into this as well in our area. So that all tracked there. My question, just so that's one point that I saw that, and I'd like to learn more, or as you go through it, you're doing your research. The other is, you had mentioned in the PowerPoint serve as a deterrent, but then it was said that there's no signage put in place to say that there's there. So because your deterrent was that they would maybe stay away from Mill Creek because they know that there's these cameras in place. But if there's no signage saying that there's these cameras in place, what's the disconnect that I'm missing?
Well, there's no requirement to have the signage. That doesn't mean that we couldn't put signage out. And we do have the transparency portal online. So as individuals look through and they find out more information about Mill Creek, also, the flock, the camera, the solar panel on the light pole, individuals would probably notice that they were there.
Gotcha. People who know would know. Someone like me wouldn't necessarily know. And now I'll be looking around. Perfect. That was cool. I just wanted to make sure of that connection. And that was actually my follow-up was, but as a council, we could put in place the requirement, for example, for it to be on certain, if it was in, there's things that we would potentially could talk to city manager and with Grant to figure out what are those policies. Because that was the other thing I saw, was that as city councils are thinking about it, also considering what them taking into consideration what are the policies they want to set in place for their city in regards to the usage of it. So that's something that we could take a look at.
Yeah, and so the police department will have a policy section in the manual regarding
Fantastic.
the use of automated license plate readers.
Mhm.
And so that'll be developed through myself, the deputy director, Grant as well, the city manager, the deputy city manager. And so we would all be on agreement on what that policy looks like.
Fantastic. That was the main thing. Let me make sure council would do that. And then that is it. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
Kristen, did you want to respond to that comment before I go to another question?
Yes, thank you so much. I just wanted to offer that we're more than happy to connect your IT team with our product team to kind of really get into the weeds on how we're safeguarding the data. And that's kind of in response to the third-party audit. We're, again, more than happy to connect our product team with your IT team to really dig into those details.
Thank you very much, Kristen.
Councilmember Cavalieri.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Chief. Good presentation. I love this. I've heard and seen this used across the country with great success, and you put some examples up just a moment ago that are, I mean, it knocks it out of the park, especially with the silver and amber alerts. I just have some technical questions that I wanted to ask because I'm just not sure. And the reason I asked them is I just want to know how detailed are the settings on Flock. For instance, it's immediately grabbing a plate and a make and a model of a car. We know that when people steal cars, that they more oftentimes than not will change the plate. So does it identify immediately that the plate and the car doesn't match and therefore creates a PC for a stop?
No, I'll let Kristen answer part of this question, but what it really is doing, if the plate is clear and it doesn't have any law enforcement status, it more than likely is not going to automatically detect that that plate should not be on that vehicle. But what it will do is take that vehicle fingerprint. So if I say that, let's say, for example, the vehicle has identifying characteristics of a bumper sticker or damage to an area, I can actually input that information that it's this make, this model, this color with a bumper sticker in the lower left corner of the rear view mirror or the rear window. And then it'll start looking for those type of characteristics, and it may come back with a hit and with that might have some time proximity to our crime that I could start looking into place. And then I might realize if I'm running that plate, I might realize that that plate does not belong on that vehicle. So it might take some more investigative leads, but we hopefully would be able to come to a resolution.
But with advanced AI and Flock and the Flock system, I mean, is it possible that we could somehow create settings, or do the settings exist where it would automatically know that it's a white Honda that we're right behind, but the plate says it's a black Subaru, and kind of taking the guesswork out of it and creating PC for a stop? I'm saying, what I'm asking is, do those settings exist in Flock? Same thing, and I'll go even a step further. Let's say a car, because we do take down the plate when they're stopped for DUI. Are those also categorized? And then we have to know if they're, let's say the court says they have to have an interlock device or something like that. How detailed, how far into the weeds does it actually go?
So those features are not currently available, but I will say our team is constantly taking feedback from law enforcement agencies across the nation. And we're really doing our best to make sure that we're getting the most efficient, effective tools. So we're really, it's pretty amazing. We get product updates monthly. So a lot of features are continued to be improved upon and built upon.
Okay, and so do we actually buy the cameras from Flock, or do we just lease them from Flock?
It's a great question. So our model is more of a subscription service. Flock owns the hardware, and you all get access to our software, and you have our data. We take care of everything else: the data storage, training, service, maintenance of the cameras. We proactively monitor the camera's health. And we did that very intentionally so that Flock could take care of hardware issues. So the city isn't saddled with outdated hardware in a few years. We make sure that your hardware is operating and up to the most efficient standards that we have. And again, we did that very intentionally so that it makes it really just user-friendly for you all.
And the reason I ask that is because if it were just purchasing cameras, we have current ARPA dollars that we're looking to throw at something to utilize those funds, and but it's an ongoing expenditure. And lastly, thank you for your answers. And lastly, what I'll say is to Councilmember Duquesne's comments, I like it is a deterrent, and I think to use it as a deterrent and get some signage out there to make sure that people. I would intentionally put big signs out there to make sure that, you know, maybe a bad guy thinks twice about coming in to rob a 7-Eleven or just perhaps steal a couple of hot dogs. So I support it. I think it's good stuff. I think it's another tool on the belt. I'm all about tools on the belt.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief, for this great presentation. When I look at this, it kind of fits into a category for me in, like, for our legislative priorities. We were discussing that we were concerned about being able to enhance the ability to pursue vehicles when there's a reason to. So, to me, this kind of sounds like it would help go in your toolkit there to help you to identify vehicles and aid in those pursuits that you might need to do. So, I am interested in learning more. You have the study sessions down for the questions, and I think my only main question and concern really goes in with Councilmember Cavallari's in regards to, we have the upfront cost but then how much is it gonna cost? I would be interested in seeing, and that's probably something that Deputy City Manager will need to bring to us, or regarding how much ongoing that's gonna cost for our budget and what that will look like. So I think that's my big question right now, so that I can see how we could fit that in budget wise. I think that's my main question right now. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, we're definitely going to bring that back to you. It's all determined on how many cameras we're looking at initially. How do we want to implement the program? Do we want to say, listen, this program is proven and we want to move forward with it? We will have all those options for you when we come back next to you and talk to you.
Councilmember Paddock?
Thank you, Chief. Great presentation. Very interesting. Do you know, well, I guess there's a few questions maybe to follow up on. The one that you might know off the top of your head, do you know if the Snohomish County Sheriff's Department uses this?
The Sheriff's Office is looking to implement this program.
Okay.
You know, the Sheriff's Office is a lot of area. So they're talking about a lot of cameras. Everett is looking at, I want to say 100 cameras. So, I mean, it just depends, right? I mean, it really depends on what your population is, what your square miles are. But yes, almost every agency, this is discussed at every Snohomish County Police Chiefs and Sheriffs meeting. There has been a advisory group established to deal with these technology upgrades that we're seeing in law enforcement. So yes, every agency is very committed to this.
And I guess this might be a bigger question, just you maybe think about it is there an opportunity to group on with like a sheriff's office, obviously being in their particular jurisdiction? Nothing to answer now, just something that I think
And I can. I mean, that is the benefit of this system, is that we can all share the information together. Snohomish County is unique in that we already share through our Snow 911 dispatch center and our RMS systems. We already share all of our information regarding police reports and contacts that we have with the public. So this is the next step. Yes, different jurisdictions are going to have different numbers of cameras and they're going to implement things differently. But I see in the future us all sharing the data from each other's cameras so that we can then obtain suspect information on vehicles that have law enforcement status.
Could we share in the cost?
And that's part of it, right? So there are partnerships that and I would see that more along the lines of the private industry within the city of Mill Creek. I don't know that sharing costs around, throughout the county. I don't know if we're there yet. I couldn't give you a definite answer.
Okay. And then I'd be interested in the next session, understanding how you operationalize this, how you prioritize, hits here versus calls and that type of thing, as well as kind of how you would be the team would be inputting data in any sort of criteria, who has access to that. That would be one kind of operational question. And then for grants, and I heard you say here that there are some guidelines around retaining images and metadata and whatnot. And I'd really like to see the legal information from grants perspective on what really does get wiped and what could stick around. I think it's important for all of us to know the ramifications of that. Thank you.
Councilmember Steckler?
Hi, Chief. Great presentation. Thank you. Do you have any estimates on cost, or if not, any similar sized cities to us? What are they spending on this? I'm just kind of curious, not that these are the numbers you're going to come back with, but just estimate, what are we looking at? Is it $1 million a month or something a little bit less of that?
I wouldn't do that to you, Councilmember Steckler. So no, I mean, it is not with everything. It's the estimates are around $3,000 a camera per year.
Per year. per year.
So, but we don't know, fully at this point, how many cameras we'd be looking at. And nor do we know, there's things that affect that cost as to how they're, deployed. If they're put on an existing light pole, if we're utilizing a flock pole, because the location that we'd like to have a camera does not have a pole. There's a lot of consideration into where, what the cost might be depending on what the deployment is.
Would Kristen have any idea of a similar sized city, what they're spending on something like this?
Oh, again, so I'll echo what Chief said. It's a $3,000 per camera per year. And then our deployment team will work with Chief and really strategize on the number of cameras and the optimal location. They take a look at traffic patterns, crime patterns, ingress and egress, existing infrastructure, because there is one-time implementation fee, installation fees, and then depending on if there's existing infrastructure and we can install on that infrastructure, that would reduce the cost. So again, there's a lot of details and variables that go into it, but $3,000 per camera per year, and then dependent upon X number of cameras.
And the installation or setup fee, right?
The one-time installation, correct. And then depending upon
that's
infrastructure.
based on the number of cameras, I assume, the one-time fee?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Oh, I think you have unanimous direction to move forward with the next steps you outlined. Look forward to more information, in particular on the costs.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to our consent agenda tonight. Item A is approval of checks number 67289 through 67362 and ACH wire transfers in the amount of $337,175.85. The audit committee was Councilmember Allison and Councilmember Paddock. Were there any exceptions?
No exceptions.
And item B is payroll and benefit ACH payments in the amount of $316,590.11. Any exception?
No exceptions.
And item C, city council meeting minutes of March 5th, 2024, March 12th, 2024, and March 26th, 2024. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The consent agenda is approved unanimously. Reports, city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have two reports. First one is, if you remember, we finally got a response back from CQC on the scholarship, the AWC scholarship that of our candidate that we chose to enter the contest. And unfortunately, Ella Williams did not get a scholarship, one of the $3,000 or $4,000 scholarships, but we still did thank her for participation. And for consolation, though, I did reach out to her and the family and invited her to come back to City Hall to take a tour of the city and probably meet some of our leadership teams. So I think that's probably, in my opinion, probably more valuable than what she's getting from the scholarship, but you never know someday. But I think it's really important, though, when these kids are really young, to kind of introduce them to public service. And so I'm going to welcome her back sometime in the next few months to take a tour of the city, and we can talk to her more about kind of what we do, kind of plant the seed down the road. She's really focused on IT and that industry when she goes back to school, but you never know where these kids head up in the history that these kids have at such a young age, and things they've done are far beyond what I've ever done and I can imagine. So it's valuable, and then the least we could do is just try to get her back in and just explain to her kind of what we do in local government. So the next report is just a monthly update, and I'll try to go through this fairly quickly. Our city engineer is still going through jet lag and coming back on vacation. So just high level, as you've heard recently with 1961, we were merely finalizing our 20-year vision. That'll be finalized along with the 3 to 5 year planning end of May. We're looking at, we're kind of waiting for State of the City, which is tomorrow. So don't forget that 12 p.m. is, hopefully everybody will be there. Yeah.
It'll be 3 hours away pretty soon.
So State of the City, and then we'll have on the 15th of May, some more community engagement through City Chat. And so hopefully we'll get maybe some feedback on our 20-year vision, and if there's any minor edits, we can make those as well before the end of May when the mayor's back. Post 1961 strategic planning will happen after, as Rob kind of implied, down the road. And we'll do some planning as we start moving that budget session. Comp plan update, as y'all are aware, and you'll probably get an update from Councilmember Paddock on the Planning Commission happenings from the last meeting. DRCC will bring back a report. Oh, these two, the comp plan and DRCC will bring back as a report back on May 5th to give you an update kind of where we're at with not only comp plan, but hopefully we'll have a report from is it wetland resources on the delineation by then too. So then of course the budget process, we're starting to probably begin commencing discussions on the next 2 years fairly soon here. Now I'll pass it off to city manager, city engineer.
Oh, I got a promotion. Yeah, thank you. So just quickly going through our CIP, our capital improvement projects and other programs, NPDS yearly reporting, we got our report in by the end of March. We're just resolving a couple of issues with ecology currently, so that we can work to make sure that we are fully in compliance next year. Pavement preservation program, we are currently targeting end of May to go out to bid for that and have construction begin in late June. So we'll be paving over a lot of the neighborhoods then. We are also just signed a contract for the pavement assessment. It will take 2 days for them to assess all of our pavements, and then it'll take about another month or two for them to evaluate it to give us a new program for that will incorporate into the capital improvement plan for the upcoming years. Safe Streets and Roads for All, we have finalized the grant for that. We just got final approval from FHWA last week. And so we'll be taking that, bring that to you guys for approval, I believe, in 2 weeks. Silvercrest Park improvements and Grade C, both the bids have been awarded, and we are just getting some final items of the contracts done before we issue notice to proceed on those. So those will be starting within the next month or two on construction. Library Park drainage assessment, just as you heard from project engineer Soltani tonight, we are accepting the grant for that and are moving forward with the design. We are also looking to make sure that we are getting a good bid for the wetland delineation for that as well, to make sure we are not overpaying on that. North Creek Trail, we'll be doing some more assessment on that a little bit later on this summer to figure out where we want to spend the money that we're getting from the county on that as well. Sweetwater Ranch, we are going full steam ahead on design. We just discovered a new catch basin in the backyard of a citizen in Holly that was buried under 4 feet of dirt. So we are doing investigations, finding all kinds of new fun things with that one. Design is still targeting end of May, early June for a 30% design, which will then come into a construction in late summer. Other items are on hold pending a facilities plan. We are also getting things kicked off with the capital improvement plan heading in for the end of this approval at the end of this year.
Thank you. Any questions?
One quick clarification. So the North Creek Trail is actually in assessment. It's not in design yet.
We haven't even accepted the grant yet, so we're still figuring out exactly what we're doing with that. There are portions of the trail that are damaged, and so we're looking at just replacing the pavement there and probably removing the trees that are causing the damage as well.
Okay, so maybe we update that to we're assessing, not designing.
Right. Well, it says the design starts in June, so it's not quite June yet.
Okay.
One more.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, Councilmember Duque.
It was my fault. I couldn't reach the button. I moved myself too awkwardly to the side. Apologies for not remembering. So it is trees and the pavement, but not the fence.
Correct.
Because the fence is
owned by the private property owners.
Correct. So that's what, when there's and Yep, I'm good. Thank you very much. There's additional, but I will follow up privately. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
So that's one thing that regarding that fence, as long as in the trash. And a lot of things are happening along that trail that are not vegetation or pavement related, so we're all aware of that. It's a bigger discussion on how we're gonna approach that, so we're, yeah, kind of on it for now, so thanks.
Yeah, can we work on moving that discussion forward? Because I think if we need to have some discussion regarding code enforcement or changing code or anything of that nature to make sure that it is kept up better, then perhaps we should have that discussion, so.
There are probably different ways you can handle that, and we'll have to talk with Director Todd and the team and figure out, given the existing standards that have been in place since development of those properties, that we'll figure out something. But yes, we will.
Didn't we create an ordinance last year that could be applicable here?
What ordinance are you referring to, Vince?
The cleanup, the maintaining of certain areas and spaces and responsibilities.
I think you're referring to the homeless encampments on private property.
Correct, but I think it's probably could be maybe a little bit broader.
Well, staff will look into that when we can address that when they come back to us with a more definitive scope of what they're looking at.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Customers, nobody else? Questions? Okay, so one more slide real quick. So per council's suggestion, I updated this slide, and so it gives you a sense of kind of what these projects are that we have and kind of how they're slated for the next for this year. One of the top priorities here is landscaping, 50-foot setbacks and so forth. There are 250,000 slated for this project, and we're going to try to get to that sometime in the middle of the year, within those few months listed there. LED street light upgrade, I believe that is required prior to a lot of the lights that we're purchasing that are going to be put up. So that's why that's up top. Now, this is not an order of priority, but it kind of is because I kind of put them this way. So website development is in process, and that's happening now. Working on getting a web host, and but D2 is moving forward, and pretty soon we'll start engaging departments on developing our site. And council will be providing feedback to, as you requested in the past, at some point in time in the timeline. As you know, wayfinding signs, marketing gave an update on the wayfinding, and then so you already know where that's at. About 95% completed with the police manual. We're getting close, really close with that one, and then we'll be starting the personnel very soon. One that you probably haven't been aware of is networking switch replacement. It's an IT project that will start and commence probably in the few months, and then we'll have that done hopefully in 2 to 3 months, and that's an IT related project. Springbrook is moving forward. Our finance director is leading that, and we're starting to get through those modules, and that's slated to be done by the end of the year. Fee study, so another big one we're going to be starting, which will address all the things that are fee related across the city, mostly on the public works side, policing as well. Police substation, pretty close with that too. We still needed to establish a lease of that 500 square foot space over there. It's all built out. IT is pretty much installed in there. A few other things to do, but we're really close to getting that opened up. Hopefully within a month or two. Citywide video security system. That is, I think, complete. I think Chief needs to still test that system. We got the IT wireless piece of it in there, and I think we're close, right? Yeah. Citywide GS, that's still in process. A lot of work to do on that one. Asset management systems still in process as well. And then the last two, we're still kind of figuring out capacity on those. So with that, take any questions.
Any questions? Councilmember Duque?
Thank you so much for this. So, 3 questions. When you show end of December, you're hoping it is this year? Are any of these
Correct.
projected to potentially go into next year, or right now we're confident that, it'll be this year?
Yeah, that's why I put estimate at the very bottom there. We're not sure exactly. The goal is to get them all done.
The goal is to get them all
Per
done.
council's request that we, that's one of your goals that you had at the beginning of years is try to, and so we're doing our best to try to get all these, by the end of the year.
Yeah.
They may trickle over to the beginning of the year, depending on kind of where we're at and competing priorities across all the departments. So, I think like all projects, a lot of these are going to take more time than we think, given that there's so many dependencies across these projects.
Yes.
Stakeholders. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The unknowns, as Councilmember Allison just said to me. Completely agree. Just that's why I wanted to check in on that. Also, this is not a question, more of a good luck in May and June, because I think they all overlap in May and June. So I'm not sure what's gonna happen, but if you need people to bring you coffee or something, I guess just let us know how we can help and roll up our sleeves, because I wish you luck.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Okay.
All right, that's it. Then I'll pass it on to parking. I'll give an update.
Thank you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. I am just here to remind you about tomorrow's State of the City luncheon. This is our, I believe, I don't know the back history, but our 3rd version. The first 2 were recorded. And then this is just a new idea we had. We wanted to start to increase community engagement, and having a captive audience made the most sense. So we used our budget and supported local restaurants who are going to provide a lunch for the first 150 attendees. So join us at 12 noon at the Forum tomorrow. I would advise getting there at 11:45. That's when the gates will open. We do have gatekeepers. Good luck getting past them before 11:45.
What about the mayor?
It should be on your calendar for 11:30.
Thank you.
Yes. So food is going to be provided by the Lodge, Brooklyn Brothers, and Blazing Onion. There's going to be pizza, sliders, appetizers, and there will be vegan options as well. And I don't want to say we're limiting it to the first 150. We're going to see how it goes, right? So if everyone, we might get 200 out of it. Depends on how many will fit there. So forecast is mostly cloudy, 55 degrees. So bring a jacket. It is covered, so we should be okay. We'll just get close to each other, but it has good coverage there. But we are very hopeful this type of venue is going to provide a more engaging platform for the city and its residents. And of course, there are going to be Costco cookies. I think, right? Yeah. So, but as before, it will be recorded. We will make it available to everybody to watch later on, and we'll get that published as soon as possible. So for this cleanup, I was just gonna wing it, and then Barb said I've been writing an essay over there because she pressured me to do this detailed report. So this presentation was actually published on Thursday, and we had about 40 folks signed up. And I believe, Barb could correct me here, we had more than 100 volunteers over the 3 events. That's about right? Yeah, 100 volunteers. And that's from the 44th group that was on over the weekend, city staff, and then of course the resident event that happened yesterday from 4 to 7. But I think Councilmember Paddock can certainly confirm that the North Creek Trail is clean. Right? Yes, yes. So inside the fences, yes. don't go outside. No. But I do want to say, Barb is very considerate, giving out thanks to everybody. But the countless hours, the countless waiver forms and vests and everything that Barb did was amazing. So I just like to ask everybody to give Barb an applause for her amazing volunteer work. I mean, none of this really would happen, at least at the level that we've been doing it. So, but it was really awesome to see, no, I'll start there. 10 Holzen come out in full force with their entire workforce, along with Four Stitch and Jeff and Greg from the chamber. They totally covered 9th Avenue. And 9th Avenue, you guys know, is that wonderful area just south of QFC. But they are one of 5 adopters of our 19 segments for the Adopt a Street program. And I'll just segue into this. So this is the pilot program that was first announced in the spring edition of the Mill Creek Living magazine. Since then, we've had plenty of other adopters, such as the Youth Advisory Board, Parks and Rec Board, City Mill Creek staff, and the Girl Scouts Unit 222. As you can see here, we have 19 segments, so we've got 5 segments adopted with 14 left. We've contacted all the different local businesses and organizations with hopes of having all these adopted by the summer. Although we've exceeded our budget for this, we have acquired tons of branded safety equipment that's also going to help market this program. Lots of great stuff. And then we also published a bunch of photos and video from the from Earth Day this afternoon, so you can see that on social media. Any questions?
Just a great job.
Yeah.
Yeah, great job, Scott. And no question here, but just wanted to comment that the safety materials that you handed out were quite impressive, because we had the Girl Scouts out and the vests were really nice. And it's nice to have you guys gave us some of the bags, which were a big hit with the girls to have to wear. And the little, I don't know what you call the grabber things. Yeah. Okay. I was like, the grabber. Were a huge hit with the girls. So it's really nice to have everything right there in that bag. And so you just pull out the bag and you have all the things you need. So that was very helpful. And I'm sure everyone will find it helpful to be able to just get the tools and go out there and clean up the streets. So that was great work on you guys, and probably Barb did a lot of work on that too. So thank you.
Yeah, all bags were packed by Barb. And we do plan on getting more safety vests in child sizes.
Perfect.
Any other questions? Thank you, Scott.
Mayor Pro Tem, council members, the chief has appointed me tonight to provide our first quarter report. And so here I stand. I'll start with the staffing. We have filled our 23 FTEs for sworn law enforcement officers. And we have also filled all of our civilian vacancies for our civilian staff, our records tech and evidence. Super excited. We're glad to have them all on board. They're going to be great new additions to the city for certain. The next topic was you each received a first quarter kind of a statistical rundown of what occurred. I think I wanted to add some more context to this so that everyone had a good picture of how much this news is just really outstanding for our city. First of all, in the years that they have to compare to 2022, 2023, and then this year, I want to make sure everyone's aware that in 2022, we had 10 patrol officers working the road. That's 4 shifts, a total of 10 people. In 2023, we still had 10 people assigned to patrol. And in 2023, we had 13. That's where we're currently stand on this. I'm sorry, 2024, we have 13 patrol officers that are actively working the roadway. because we have so many that are in training or not quite out on their own yet. So we're just talking about a difference of 3 officers. So as a patrol operations guy, as a person in charge of this group of people, it is super exciting to see the proactive work that these officers are doing. I'm not going to go over every one of these things, but some highlights are in 2022 and 2023, there was 424 contacts, basically around that 420 number that officers made. During this first quarter of this year, they made 1,500 traffic contacts. So that's observing a violation and making a stop of a vehicle and either educating verbally, saying, look, if that's not okay, or, you know, writing them an infraction. That number increased 257%. This is not a lot more officers. This is the same officers just doing more proactive work. On the calls for service, I think that's confusing just to look at what that number, what that actually means. Calls for service is the data that is pulled from our communication center, basically, every time an officer logs or is called to something. So this includes self-initiated field activity officers are reviewing on their own. That increase was 67% from 2023 to 2024. So what it shows us is our officers want to do good work. Our officers out there working hard and giving objective data to support this. This is data that we really don't generate. We pull from our other sources, but just showing the commitment to doing their job and doing it properly is very exciting for me to look at, and our citizens should be very feel good about what service that's being provided. Our numbers across the board are down. We had our crimes against persons in 2021 during this same time period was 41 events. In this latest 2024, that number is 19. So I'm really proud. I know the chief and I are both very proud of the members and what work is being done by them, and I appreciate your time. Is there any questions?
Any questions? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't actually have a question, but just some comments. Thank you for bringing this report tonight. And this is really impressive and exciting because it shows that we are increasing presence like we're being asked to, and it gives us the data to give out there to people who, when they're asking questions. And this shows that you have been listening. We are out there making more traffic contacts in particular, because that's the one thing that we get so many discussion about is speeding. So this is just really impressive and I'm really excited about it. My question to I guess everybody then is what are we doing? How are we getting this information out there? This is amazing information. We want to be making sure we're communicating this to the community so they know the great work you're doing and that we have been listening to them and we are responding.
I could speculate, but I know that the chief has been working on a dashboard.
Yeah, we are currently working with our record supervisor to formulate a dashboard, and we're discussing it with the city manager's office to how we want to get that out to the community. We're working with marketing with that as hopefully as well, so.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
He's excited about it.
He's excited. I can't see him right now, but he's excited, I'm sure. I'm sure. All right, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you. Other staff reports?
That's the end of staff reports, Mayor.
Okay. I've got a number of items to get through. Do people have long reports? Do we need to extend or should we just, we'll wait and see where we're at 9:30. First, thanks in advance, Mayor Pro Tem, for covering for me for the next 2 meetings. I'll be in Arizona on the 7th for my son's college graduation, and I'll be on vacation in Portugal the next week, but I will be back for the Memorial Day ceremonies and the meeting on the 28th. I'm excited for the State of the Union. Speech is all ready.
Wow.
We're going to be dividing it a little bit. I did a dry run this afternoon, and I think I got my portion down to about 70 minutes. So I think we're gonna be okay, but I'm excited for it and thank God it's covered tomorrow. A little bit of a mea culpa. I realized my schedule's getting jammed when I'm sitting at a conference Thursday and Friday. Friday night, I'm having a glass of wine with my wife and I realize, crap, I'm double booked. I was supposed to be at the SEC dinner last night. So I don't have a report from the SEC dinner because I forgot that I'd already scheduled to be at a conference out of town. I will be attending the Growth Management Planning Policy Board meeting on the 2nd with my other hat on, but I'll report back at the end of the month on what happens at that meeting. I was asked to be at an event for Frontier Dermatology. It's Dr. Dieter Schmidt, just a building next door here, had his clinic is the first in the state that's offering this new procedure. It's a non-invasive, it's called Gentle Cure treatment for skin cancer. So it's offered in 40 other states, but this is the first clinic in Washington that's offering it. So they actually had 2 events, representatives from Senator Lubbock's office and Rachel from Representative Del Benny's office was there. And the Herald was there when I was there in the morning, but they did another presentation when the TV cameras were there later in the morning that I could attend. So I wasn't there for that. But speaking of Representative Del Benny, we had a Mayor Pro Tem and I and City Manager and Deputy City Manager had, I think, a very productive meeting with her yesterday afternoon, talking about opportunities for where we can get some federal funds. And we're going to be talking further about projects where we might be able to get some funding. She wants to get us money. They very much want us to be applying. So we'll be working on identifying projects that we can ask her for money for. And I'd like to end just with an interesting presentation I heard last week on homelessness that I wanted to share. I was at a annual luncheon for the Housing Development Consortium, which is a nonprofit housing entity that works with nonprofit housing developers in King County. And actually April was there. I saw she was in attendance as well. And the guest speaker was a gentleman named Greg Colburn. He's got an interesting background. His background is in investment banking and private equity. He's got a Bachelor of Arts, he's got a MBA, and he's got a PhD. And he's written a book that's entitled Homelessness is a Housing Problem. We've often talked about what causes homelessness. Is it drug addiction? Is it domestic violence? Well, what is the cause of it? And then some people say it's housing. It's these other issues. I haven't had a chance to peruse his website, but his website is homelessnesshousingproblem.com. No periods in between it. But he gave a really, what I thought was a thought-provoking analogy to make his point of why he thinks it's a housing problem. The example he gave is, imagine that you've got a game of musical chairs. You've got 10 people and 10 chairs. One of those 10 people is a woman who's a victim of domestic violence who's on crutches. The music starts. One of the chairs is pulled away, so there's 9 chairs. The music stops, and that woman is left without a seat. Is the cause of her housing problem her domestic violence situation, or is it the lack of housing supply that doesn't provide the type of housing for people that are suffering from those things? And his point was that homelessness is really bringing to light these societal problems that we have. Those problems aren't the cause of our homelessness problem. They're symptomatic of it and bringing to light the issues that we're now grappling with, because we don't have the type of housing to deal with the people who are suffering from drug addiction or domestic violence. So I just thought it was a take I hadn't heard before, and I thought it was an interesting perspective. So I encourage you to take a look at his website, homelessnesshousingproblem.com. So that's what I had for tonight and until the end of May. So Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, can we go ahead and extend just a little bit? I'm nervous about it.
Sure. Why don't we have a motion to extend to 9:45, just so in case we need it.
Move to extend the meeting to 9:45.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Enthusiastic
Perfect.
support for that motion. The
All right,
motion
thank
is
you.
approved.
I was nervous that I might talk too long on that. So I just want to start off regarding, we did meet with Congresswoman Del Benny yesterday, myself, the mayor, and Laurel and Martin. And the main topic of our conversation was something that we have been asking questions about from the legislative committee and wanting more information on regarding the community project fund. And so she kind of walked us through a lot of different items that can be used that they can get funding for underneath the community project funding. So she mentioned things such as infrastructure, such as road improvements, some building improvements, different things like that. She's really interested in childcare is really important. So just a whole slew of different things. That was just a few of them. And it really answered some of our questions and also got me thinking on this, that we really have some opportunities with this funding that they can provide for us to go through and think about some of the things we want to do over in the sub area, such as maybe enhancing the stormwater pond and making it nicer. Things like that we could use some money to spur getting that area looking nicer. So that was, anyway, just a thought in my head. But so that's something that we can work on in the future, coming up with some things to give to her for funding, because she's definitely excited to go and get us some funding for some projects. So that's exciting news for us. Second, just want to comment, I already mentioned, but we participated in Earth Day. Thank you everyone for all your hard work. We were out with the Girl Scouts and it was really great. And I also want to comment that Representative Berg was out working this weekend, participating in Earth Day events for the city as well. And thank Tanis for coordinating all the Girl Scouts to get out, because that's a big job. Also, I will be at the SAT meeting tomorrow night. So if anything is important that needs to come back, I'll let you know. And you already saw the presentation today about the port that I'd mentioned last time. That was the exact same presentation. So you are all up to speed with me on that. And finally, just a off comment here. I want to flag once again that the water fountains in the parks, if we're back to getting in the parks, it's getting warm, and we really need to look at doing something about the water fountains in the parks. And I also want to flag that the basketball nets are in dire need of being replaced as well. And I did bring it up to the chair of the Parks Board. So so they're aware of my thoughts on that, but just something that I wanted to flag that I noticed this week that we need to be taking some attention to. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Cavallari,
No report, Mayor.
Councilmember Steckler.
I have a very quick report. Since we're not going to be meeting again until this happens, I just wanted to remind everybody that the City of Mill Creek and the Mill Creek Kiwanis Club is putting on their annual electronic recycling event that is free to the public on Sunday, May 5th, the day after the garage sale here in Mill Creek. It starts at 10 o'clock, usually is done by 2, unless the line is too long and we just keep bringing people in. But please spread the word, get the word out in any social media you can. We'd like to get as many people there as possible. Thank you.
Councilmember Allison, any report?
No report.
Councilmember Duque.
Yes, I have a report.
Yeah.
As councilmember and fellow council members may be aware, I attend the Community Engagement Committee or committee group, I guess might be the better word to say. Barb Heidel attends it as well. It's once a month, and it's made up of the food bank, representatives from the food bank, DVS, the library. It's a whole group of people doing amazing, great work. So I wanted to give my just update what's going on that I thought all of you would be interested in. I wanted to first flag, as I know the last time we talked about extravaganza, there was a lot, there were just other issues, but I wanted to say that all of the participants who were there at the community, at this meeting, who participated in extravaganza only had great things to say about it. And that they loved their volunteering for it and being a part of it, and really appreciated how it all worked. And the reminder from Mill Creek Food Bank that they participating families donated 700 pounds of food to the Mill Creek Food Bank. So if I think of Jody's comment about what is a measure of success, I think that's a huge one, that all of those people were happy. And that Mill Creek Food Bank is talking about food donations. Their Stamp Out Hunger is on May 11th. That's the one that has to do with the United States Postal Service. So if you want any additional information, I can provide that for you as well. In terms of the chamber, the scholarship is still available for high school students. The deadline is April 30th. So if you want additional information, I think I've talked about it before, but you can let me know. And segue into that, fundraise to support the Mill Creek Chamber Scholarship Fund. One way that they raise funding is through their Mill Creek Town Center Wine Walk, which will be Saturday, May 4th at 5 p.m. So it looks like that weekend is garage sales, then wine walk, then turn in your electronics. And so I think we have a busy Mill Creek weekend. So if you haven't purchased tickets, be sure to do so. I also wanted to flag, if none of you have ever, we have our wonderful Mill Creek Library here in the city, but there's also the Mariner Library, which is over on 128th on the other side of I-5. They have new story times in Spanish. And so just flagging for anyone that is interested there. And that the Everett School District has a new family resource center that's here in the South District area. The location's at Silver Lake Elementary, and they're gonna have an open house on May 9th at 4 p.m. Also, because this community event is filled with a bunch of librarians, they were really excited to hear about the proclamation that what the city did. So that was the main talk the next day, and there was a round of applause. And so they were very excited for that. So that's it. There's a lot more events that are going on, but wanted to make sure that to flag those highlights of things that are happening in our community. Thank you.
Councilmember Paddock.
Well, it looks like I have 16 minutes, so
What can you say?
terrific results from the police department. Just thank you so much for that. And I'm sure we all thank you, thank you, thank you. This is really great. The community is really going to be happy to hear this. Thank you so much to Jody and Scott and Officer Citizen Number 1 Heidel for what was just a tremendous Earth Day event, like everyone else has said. The only thing I want to add to that was I was able to walk with a couple of new to Mill Creek residents that were just thrilled living in the city, and one had come from Kansas. The other had, I think she said came from Lake Stevens, which is about the same distance. And it was great to have those folks just so enthusiastic, and they'd been here for a few months and they wanted to see the city and thought, well, trash is the way to do that. So that was fantastic. And the Saturday event, we actually have a gentleman here who kind of walked past and was like, what y'all doing kind of thing. I've been living here for 10 years and I wanted to get involved. How do I do that? And obviously the first step, pick up trash. And then the next step is to come into the council meeting. So welcome, sir. We're really glad that you're here. It's always this fun. So looking forward to seeing you next week. Week after next. You have a planning commission report that Sybil had put together and Mike Todd had sent along. Just a quick summary of what happened at the planning commission this last week. One thing that they also added, and we'll try to get a copy of it, is kind of a pick list of the topics that are going to be covered by month as we work up towards, or excuse me, as the planning department works up towards October when they come and bring the final presentation before we start making some decisions on what we're looking for in the coming months. So if you're interested, take a look at what was done over the last couple of over the last planning commission meeting. And other than being incredibly distracted by Councilmember Cavallari's knees, that's the end of my report.
He doesn't know what we're talking about. Okay, that brings us to audience communication. Would the council in chambers, not seeing anyone online? Okay, with that, we've reached the end of our agenda at 9:32, and without any objection, we'll adjourn the meeting. I'll see you at the end of May.